Hello and welcome to a bonus episode.
It's the bonus episode.
We don't know what
I'm not
podcast it is,
doing
or
the.
no?
I'm not doing the trash future noise.
You've got to resist it.
It's not the free one.
Surely you know what episode, what podcast this is a bonus episode of. If you have access to the bonus episode,
you are much more confident than I am.
I might put this one on the free feed as a treat. But give us money anyway.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's it.
This is the kind of content that you could be having, a more relaxed, a more loose. It has the sound of us pissing on it also.
Yes.
Kind of, well, there's your problem.
That was a glass of mead being filled up. To be fair, it does have a very ureic color.
Very nice.
That's
Appetizing.
true, yeah. So what you see on the screen in front of you.
Also, so we got Gareth Dennis back on. Hi,
we
Gareth.
do have Gareth. Yeah. Hello,
Thanks
Gareth.
for coming.
Yes, thanks for coming.
Sorry. Hi, everyone. Hello, Patreon listeners. Hello.
This episode is called the Penn Station Rant.
Perfect.
Yes.
Me and Liam can just log off, and the train knowing about Caucus of this episode.
No, we need you. We need you. We need you.
Yeah.
It's weird. It's weird to react to you guys ranting.
Yes. Oh,
yes.
Justin, before you start, I have treats. This is a bonus episode, which means that as a guest, I have to bring treats. That's not really a thing. I just made it up right now. But Liam, I have treats for you.
Yes, go on.
Liam, in a recent episode, I believe you made sexual noises about the sound of my voice, which made me blush very, very vigorously.
Good.
And then I thought, well, I need to bring a treat then. If ever I get to appear on a future episode, I need to bring a treat. And it just so happens to be that, I used to recite Burns poetry when I was a kid. And there happens to be a Burns poem that is that's let's say very relevant. So if you'll give me 45 seconds.
Please.
All right.
This is a treat for you. This is Liam Anderson, which is a modification of John Anderson by Burns. Liam Anderson, my Jo Liam, when we were first acquaint, your locks were like the raven, your bonny brow was brent. But now your brow is belt, Liam, your locks are like the snow, but blessings on your frosty paw, Liam Anderson, my Jo. Liam Anderson, my Jo Liam, we clam the hill together, and mony a canty day, Liam, we've had we an another. Now we maun totter down, Liam, and hand in hand we'll go, and sleep together at the foot, Liam Anderson, my Jo.
Fantastic.
Marry me.
It's the pace of the podcast is slowed to a trundle, but Liam, there you go, enjoy.
Liam's sort of like militantly aggressive thing, having to confront being genuinely touched emotionally is quite something.
I'm honored. This is beautiful. Yeah, I it's funny because is in podcasting, especially this podcast tradition, I have my dinner in front of me, and I was just gonna come off mute to slurping noises, but I thought, no, Gareth, thank you so much. You're a dear friend. That was beautiful. Alice, I'll kill you.
That's reasonable. I'd like to see you try, old man.
All right.
All right. So old.
Now that we got two-thirds of the podcast threatening each other.
That's right.
Here we go. We're going to start with history. Welcome to New York City.
Oh,
hey,
truly
I'm walking here.
The city that is walking here.
Yes. Okay, so for railroads to get to New York City, there was something called the Hudson River problem. Problem being the Hudson River, right?
It's named for how it is.
Yes. So in order to get over the Hudson River, you had to build a bridge or a tunnel, which no one thought was feasible, right? The other option is you could take a ferry. So all these railroads, they built terminals in Jersey City, in Weehawken, in Hoboken, right? So we got some of them here. So this is the Weehawken Terminal. This is from the West Shore Railroad. You got the Pennsylvania Railroad Exchange Place Terminal up here.
I like the Pennsylvania one. It's very contiguous. You know, you don't even have to go outside the building to walk to your ferry.
Oh yeah, this was the largest train shed in the world. Briefly, I believe. None of it's left, of course.
Of course.
You had Communipod Terminal down here. This is the Central Railroad of New Jersey. That one's still there, but it's unused. It's part of a park. You had the Hoboken Terminal. That's the Delaware, Lackawanna, and Western. That one is still there. It is still used, and it also has ferry slips. You can just sort of walk to the ferry. Even now, there's
cool.
like one ferry that comes each hour.
Somewhat less cool, but still kind of cool.
Yeah. There's no ferries that meet the trains anymore. And then you had Pavonia down here, Pavonia Terminal. This was the Erie Railroad. And that was another, the ferry comes to meet the train. That's gone. There's a couple others. The Susquehanna Railroad Terminal was way up here. You had a weird terminal down here the Lehigh Valley had, which I think was sabotaged by Germans in World War I.
Surely not Operation Pastorius. Was that World War II? I'm going to have to check which one of the two doomed German attempts to sabotage New York this was.
well, this one worked, and the Lehigh Valley Railroad got sued by the Russian Provisional Government.
Okay. Operation Pastorius was the Second World War one.
Yeah. That was like the weird, not Bolshevik government. But
like Kerensky,
yeah. The Long Island Railroad came from the other side, and from Long Island, they got stuck either in Queens or I believe Flatbush Terminal, which is now Atlantic Terminal. They had built by now. And you had to transfer to the ferry. It was annoying. Freight customers in Manhattan had easy access to river shipping, but not so much by rail, except by the New York Central, right? Which had Grand Central Terminal, of course, direct access to Manhattan. And they had their West Side line, which served a bunch of industrial customers that would otherwise ship by one of these numerous railroads who got almost there, but not quite, right?
But it saves you going the long way around because you can get it directly to where it's going. And this is something the New York Central guards very jealously, right?
Oh, yeah. And there's a sort of unofficial, truce here that they had for a long time. So this is Grand Central Station.
All these guys staring at each other across the Hudson, spitting into the water at each other.
Yes. There are three iterations of Grand Central Terminal. There was Grand Central Depot, which is this one right here. This is Grand Central Station. And Grand Central Terminal, which is the current building. That was later than this, right? But yeah, they were all on the same spot. But the location was, as the name implies, central, right? The railroad had this advantage with shippers and commuters, right? And that meant, you could ship a whole bunch of places without transloading or taking, getting from one train to another, right? And this station was approached by way of a long tunnel under Park Avenue. Initially, they put steam locomotives in there, which is really dumb because in 1902, that tunnel was so full of smoke that a commuter train missed a signal and whacked into another commuter train, killed like 12 people.
Sort of the boring company of its day.
Yes. So they installed third rail electrification in 1904, and they began plans to build the newer, much bigger Grand Central Terminal that exists today, right? But yeah, the informal truce here was like, number one, Manhattan's the New York Central's territory. And this was a sort of informal truce, but also B, it was so damn hard for anyone else to get into Manhattan, right?
Because everyone else the right of way just to get to lay track in Manhattan.
Well, everyone else is coming from the west. The New York Central is coming from the north, right? And the north is easy. The west, you got to deal with the Hudson River, right? So around 1900, it was, no one could figure out how to do this, right? Or I guess 1890. 1890 is when the first serious scheme to get other railroads into Manhattan is proposed by a guy named Gustav Lindenthal.
Oh, boy.
Yeah.
Lindenthal.
I'm back.
Enemy of the show.
Yes.
Apparently.
No, I like Gustav Lindenthal. He's made all the best bridges.
Enemy of the show.
Yes. So Gustav Lindenthal's idea is to build a bridge which was twice over the largest suspension bridge ever conceived.
That was my reaction when I just flicked the slide to get the full high res. Oh, there we are.
Yeah.
There it is.
So the idea is,
The most mighty engineering feat of bridge building known to the world.
yes, they would build a 14-track bridge over the Hudson River.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Ooh,
And it's a suspension bridge.
I like this idea a lot, actually.
That would connect to a Manhattan terminal that would be near the current location of what's now the Fashion Institute of Technology.
Oh,
Yeah.
actually, my grandmother went there. For library science for some reason.
Wow.
I'm loving railways flow. I'm loving the idea of 14 tracks full of commuter trains all going in the same direction, creating a bow wave on the suspension bridge as it goes forward.
So the 10 tracks would be for commuter trains, commuter trains, long distance trains. 4 tracks would be for rapid transit. It's unclear to me exactly how the rapid transit trains would make it all the way up to this bridge, because it was going to be 135 feet over the surface of the river.
Crane, big crane.
Big crane.
Yeah.
Big,
You
big
need
jet tug.
an elevator like the Waterloo and City Line had.
No, you just have a big corkscrew incline. It's fine.
Yes.
Oh my God. So this
But
would
with 4
be
tracks, you need to do like a double helix, which would look
it
even
would have
cooler.
looked awesome. Big regrets this didn't happen. Yeah.
Like one of the roller coaster launch things. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
Like a flume.
Yeah.
Your rapid transit flume.
If you live or die, that's between you and God.
So this bridge would be a mile long with a 2,850 foot center span.
Jesus.
Again, 135 feet over the river. So you can see down here, this is the proposed bridge, and this is the Brooklyn Bridge.
Oh dear.
Yeah.
Now that's scale.
And then you'd stick this high level Union Station at one end of the bridge in Manhattan. Right.
Which you build on top of this kind of pyramid.
Yeah, you know the
Yeah.
Bass World Shops Pro, Bass World Pro
Bass-
Shops,
Bass World Pro Shops.
Bass World Pro Shops. Yeah, I'm tired, man.
I mean, how many blocks would you be bulldozing on the other side? Crikey. I mean, yeah.
Did the Pharaoh Khufu wonder about blocks when
No.
he made his pyramid? Of
No.
course not. And neither should we.
I found a rare map on the next slide. But I'm going to keep talking here. So you need a mile of 2.5% grade on the New Jersey side, right?
Oh.
So Samuel Ray and George Brooke Roberts. Samuel Ray was, I think, chief engineer, and George Brooke Roberts was the president of the Pennsylvania Railroad.
I'm
right?
imagining you're on your little rapid transit thing at the top of this mile long 2.5% grade.
Don't look down.
And the brakes go out, and you're just like, you start to roll forward at like 1 mile an hour, and you're like, don't like this. Don't like where this is going.
And away we go.
Whether you want to or not.
So the Pennsylvania Railroad was a major investor in this project from the start in 1890. But the idea of the project was it's going to be shared among the several railroads which had New Jersey terminals, right? Gustav Lindenthal, of course, he designed the bridge, and he was a self-educated civil engineer.
Hell yeah, I love those words together.
He was notable for several bridges he hadn't built yet. Like
that's the best kind of self-taught engineering.
Yeah.
Self-taught, haven't actually done any engineering. The best kind.
Yes. Well, he went on to design the Queensboro Bridge and the Hell Gate Bridge.
I immediately love this guy. Okay.
Yeah, no, he has all the best bridges.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, man.
And he was beloved by railroads and municipalities alike for being able to build these bridges a lot cheaper than anyone else.
Uh-oh.
What corners did he cut?
So one of the things he did was point out that a train is a distributed load and not a point load.
Sure.
Ahead of
It's
his
a long
time.
thing. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
So that meant you could use less material because you were considering a train as a train rather than what other engineers were doing, which is considering a spherical and frictionless train, right?
Yeah.
Just rolling my perfect train orb across the bridge.
Like that Russian warship, yes.
Mm-hmm. I appreciate the sort of like true to life filthy color of all of the water in this map.
Oh my God, yeah. It looks great. So the idea here is, right, this is, again, it's a 10 10 tracks for steam railroads, 4 tracks for rapid transit. Based on this map, that rapid transit would be what is now the 7 train, right? You see the 42nd Street tunnel up here, and that would have gone around and then gone up a big ramp into the Union Station, and then presumably doubled back somehow and gone over the bridge, right?
Big turntable or something.
You'd said a 2.5% grade. For those who are curious as to what that actually is, that's a 1 in 40. That's so steep. That's horribly
very steep. So it's unclear how fully fleshed out the terminal design was. I'd love to see pictures if someone has them, but the bridge was actually surprisingly close to getting done, right? They actually broke ground on this thing in 1895.
What?
Yes.
Must have been a lot of ground.
Mega bridge.
That's actually what this cornerstone is right here. The North River Bridge ground broke in June 1895. First foundation masonry laid June 18th, 1895.
I mean, for sure the ground would have been broken. This thing would have sunk 20 meters into the ground once it was finished.
Yeah.
You remember how the Nazis had those giant concrete test cylinders?
Yeah, the schwere Belastungskörper. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, okay, sure, that word.
Yeah.
That's just a normal thing to immediately be able to recall.
Sorry.
Yeah.
The heavy test body, which same.
Yes.
Which they put in Berlin. It was a big concrete cylinder and the idea was, because Berlin's built on a swamp, the idea is we build this, we measure how far it sinks. If it sinks more than this, you can't build the big fancy fucking Volkshalle that you want to build. And it did, and they still wanted to fucking build the thing. And because it's like too large and too inconvenient, it's just wedged into the swamp that neither the British nor the Americans nor the Soviets could blow it up with anything. So same as the flag to them, really. It's just still there. Just there still.
Yeah.
Germanium. Good stuff.
Yes. So Samuel Rhee went on vacation to London in 1892.
Oh, awful mistake.
The new Pennsylvania Railroad president, alexander Cassett, arranged for him to make it a working vacation.
Great. Your boss fucking telegrams you to be like, you have to do some work while you're there.
Yes.
Stop.
Said, go study the transportation system in London. Now, he had previously been there about 5 years earlier, and he saw the Metropolitan Railway, and he was like, this is the worst thing I've seen in my life. I'm just going down here. I'm getting choked out by steam locomotives.
Why do you have a round door that isn't even round? This is bullshit.
Yes. Yeah. But what he saw at this visit was much different. He went to go see the new City and South London Railway, which had bored deep under the Thames and used entirely electric traction, right? And Rhee was fascinated by this. He thought a similar solution would be great for the Pennsylvania Railroad. That is, you'd have some small electric trains that would link to waterfront terminals to a sort of distribution system in Manhattan, right?
That actually sounds sensible.
But he still favored, for trains that needed to get into Manhattan, he was still like, we're going to have to build the bridge. The bridge is the way forward. We're going to build Charing Cross Terminal, but bigger. That's the idea of this, right?
Okay.
So when he got back, the Army Corps of the Board of Army Engineers, which I believe is the predecessor to the Army Corps of Engineers, they kind of put the kibosh on the project, right? They said,
pathetic.
Okay, we actually need it to be 150 feet tall, not 135.
Oh, there we go.
What if you made it even sillier?
Yes. And then the Panic of 1893 happened, right? Costs started escalating. The railroads weren't making as much money. A lot of railroads started to get a little uneasy about the project, right? They still broke ground, but then the Pennsylvania Railroad kind of dropped out of the project, and everyone else did as well, right?
Sure.
Yeah. So, George Brooke Roberts pulled out of the project, and Pennsylvania Railroad wasn't financially backing it anymore, so it was completely unfeasible financially.
Sure. Shame.
The North River Bridge Company went bust.
Yeah, that's a bummer.
New York City could have been a good 20% weirder.
Yes.
Unbuilt New York is a whole thing.
This would be the weirdest passenger train station ever built by a long shot.
Get in the fucking train ziggurat.
Yes. You have to ascend to the heavens to catch the train.
I
We
guarantee
actually
you,
challenged God to a fist fight just by building this.
you build this in the 1890s. By the 1950s, a new American civic religion has started that involves people throwing sacrificial victims off the roof of this.
I mean, the two towers at either end of it would have been like presumably heavy enough that they would have dented the crust.
Mm-hmm.
So they would have ended up creating new, like, kind of large lakes underneath each one, which would have been, nice.
They would have been the tallest structures in New York City when they were finished.
Incredible.
And also
saw-
solid brick.
You can see in the previous slide, this is the tower compared to the Woolworth building.
Eesh.
Nice.
Yeah.
That's beautiful. We should have done this. I'm going back in
We
time
used to be a
like
proper country.
threaten the president of the Pennsylvania Railroad with a Glock that I brought from home.
It's funny how
to
you
make
think you
him do
wouldn't just
this.
unload a shotgun directly in
Oh
your
yeah,
face.
100%. I would be killed instantly as an anarchist.
I call this gun the Union Buster. It's for the protection of passengers, of course.
So George Brooke Roberts was killed by the Pennsylvania Railroad presidency in 1897, as most Pennsylvania Railroad
Happens.
presidents were.
He was killed by me with a Glock.
Yeah.
Why don't
His
you like
successor-
6 hours? What have you got against 6 hours?
I mean, nothing. I like a 6-hour fine. I just think the Glock is a funnier name to say.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's
True.
absolutely true.
That holds up, yeah.
His successor, Frank Thompson, was killed by the office of the Pennsylvania Railroad presidency in 1899.
Jesus Christ.
It ages you faster than the U.S. presidency.
You know that
Yes.
picture of Barack Obama before and after, but
Yeah.
all the time.
Yeah, well, the Pennsylvania Railroad presidency was also arguably more powerful than the U.S. presidency at this time. So Alexander Cassett, I said Alexander Cassett was president earlier. I was wrong. He was a vice president, but he assumed the presidency. He assumed
He
the
gained
throne.
the mandate of heaven.
Yeah, he
Yes.
gained the mandate of heaven
Sure.
that same year.
He achieved certain like relics of the Pennsylvania Railroad that you're
Clock's
not allowed
ticking,
to see.
buddy.
Yeah.
This is our God Emperor of the Pennsylvania Railroad.
And it would have been if they'd finished the North River Bridge, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh my God,
No,
yeah.
absolutely. God, no. Okay, someone needs to write a whole fucking novel-length thing about this where the PRR becomes the new civic religion of the United States.
Yeah, I'd read that.
Yeah, I'd read it.
So Cassett's thing was modernization and improvements, right? And he planned and constructed a lot of them, right? So down here's the Rockville Bridge. That's just upriver of Harrisburg on the Susquehanna. It was the largest bridge in the world when it was built.
By what? What? As in length? Or
I am not.
As in best.
It looks
Quite
pretty
as in
long.
best.
It's very long.
It's the
Lots
best
of
bridge,
arches.
Gareth.
It's 4 tracks.
wowza.
Yeah. It's now 3 tracks.
Mm.
Another one was Washington Union Station up here. This was a sort of
Hey, you
a
could
union.
assassinate a president in that.
No, this was to replace the station where McKinley was assassinated.
Yeah.
Um,
Nice,
You know,
nice
McKinley
streetcars out
was
there.
assassinated at the World's Fair. I think of Garfield.
oh, Garfield. Garfield was assassinated. I want to say the B&P station, right?
Ah.
So this was
Outside a
repla-
BP station.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a
goings.
commemorative coin dispute.
So the old station was right on the National Mall, and it had tracks going down the road in the National Mall, which was not very good. Union Station was a replacement for it, which was much more dignified. Right?
I think it's pretty cool to have tracks going down the National Mall. That seems
Oh
dignified.
yeah, I think
to
it
me.
would. I think it would have been funny if they kept it. It's right. It was right where the Air and Space Museum is now.
Ah.
So another thing, he supervised the quad tracking of the Northeast Corridor, double tracking the main line out to Pittsburgh, but he faced a conundrum. How did we get the railroad into Manhattan, right? Because he wanted to do it. He's like, this is what we have to do, right? And the Pennsylvania Railroad, of course, controlled 2 routes in, from the west by way of Exchange Place and a ferry, and from the east by way of the Long Island Railroad, which was a Pennsylvania Railroad subsidiary, right? If they could have a shared terminal in the middle, that would be ideal, but how do you get there, right?
Massive ziggurat bridge station.
He considered reviving the bridge project,
Oh,
actually.
hooray!
yeah. And in fact, the options that really presented themselves were you either redo the Union Station Bridge, you build a bridge from Staten Island, they might build their own bridge by themselves, or maybe they could build a tunnel, but no one could figure out how to do that, right? How would steam trains get to the station through a tunnel, right? And
don't breathe this in.
Have a series of like submarine airlocks to vent steam up.
Simply do not breathe it in.
So anyway, Cassett took his annual European vacation in 1901, and Samuel Rhee returned the favor. He telegraphed him and said,
"Hey, do some work now. Stop."
You need
Are
to.
you on holiday? Stop.
Are you on holiday?
How's the
Stop.
steel, asshole?
Hey, we actually need you to come in your day off. Stop.
And he said, go take a look at the Gare d'Orsay in Paris, right? Which is the recently completed by the Chemin Fer de Paris
Chemin
Orléans.
de Fer de Paris à Orléans.
Okay, thank you, Alice.
No worries. Chemin de Fer means iron way.
Yeah.
I see. So this station was new, it was light, it was open and airy, no steam locomotive somehow, right? Which means it was also very clean, right? And there were electric locomotives operating off a third rail that propelled trains through a 2-mile tunnel into the station. And Cassett saw this, and he talked to some of the engineers behind it, and he was convinced, we're going to build a tunnel.
Oh, pathetic.
Yeah.
We're going to do a tunnel and we're going to do electricity.
Yes. So plans were drawn up for what was to become the New York Improvements.
That sounds nefarious.
Yeah, that's a euphemism for something shifty.
So, all right, the New York Improvements were, it was not just the station, it was a whole system of railroads, right? So if you look at the original Pennsylvania Railroad, or rather, it wasn't the Pennsylvania Railroad to start out with. This was the United Companies in New Jersey main line, later acquired by the Pennsylvania Railroad. They went sort of up through Newark, right? And then it branched off, went down to Jersey City, exchanged places down here, right? Now, the New York Improvements included the Pennsylvania Tunnel and Terminal Railroad. That was the North River tunnels. And it continued into what's called Sunnyside Yard over here, right?
Yeah. Oh, I see. It just bypasses.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then this connects to the New York Connecting Railroad, and that goes to the New Haven Railroad to Boston, right? In addition, the New York Connecting Railroad goes south to a freight terminal in East New York. I believe this is now the location of Broadway Junction. Or no, it's actually closer to up here, right? Where the Long Island Railroad intersects with it there, but they, again, also had a branch up here. Right. And then you have this whole complex down here. This is for freight. Right. So you had a freight branch. It went down to Greenville Terminal here. There was a car float across the river. They were considering a tunnel for that a while as well. That didn't happen. It may happen at some point in the future, though. And then you had this Bay Ridge branch, right, that served all the industries in Brooklyn. And then you had I believe there was also the South Brooklyn Railway that went all the way down to Manhattan Beach. So there's a big freight component to this, as well as the passenger component. I mean, a lot of this was
massive. This is a huge amount of infrastructure.
Oh, yeah. All of it was big. Everything here was big, except the car float. That was kind of dinky.
Because they're still like uncertain about it because they're like, we'll probably do a tunnel.
Yeah.
At some point.
So yeah, and a lot of this was as much about serving Manhattan as it was improving freight service in Brooklyn, where there was still a shitload of factories, and also increasing the amount of freight traffic that go on the Long Island Railroad, which at this point was only doing commuter service, which was looking pretty bad financially at some point in the future, right? And there was a crank plan to put a huge seaport at Montauk, which this might have served, but
what would have
been a fucking hike. Jesus Christ.
Yeah. Just incidentally make the East River one of the busiest shipping lanes in the world.
Oh yeah. No, because that would have been shit from Europe mostly.
Yeah.
You'd come in, you'd go into Montauk, and you go into this peaceful farming community, which is now the world's second biggest city, in the space of 3 years.
So this was planned. This was being planned out in 1901.
Yes.
Okay.
Actually, yeah, a little bit earlier than 1901, but
Oh,
yeah.
okay.
All right, so this is the plan. And the difficult part was going to be the North River tunnels here and the East River tunnels over here. The North River tunnels were supposed to be the difficult part. And why are they called the North River tunnels?
Because it's
Was there
to the
more north?
west of Manhattan, therefore to be perverse, in order to
Yes.
throw the New York Central
To
off the
insult
track.
God.
You
so
can't
when-
find us.
When the Swedes and the
Oh,
Dutch
no.
settled New York and Philadelphia, not respectively, and mixed those around. The Swedes were in Philadelphia, which was New Christiana back then, and then Manhattan was New Amsterdam. They referred to the Delaware and the Hudson as the South and North Rivers, respectively.
What?
Yeah.
None of
It's
these
the
guys are
Dutch.
very
Oh, it's
good
the
at.
Dutch. We like to do things a bit crazy.
None of these guys are that great at navigation. It seems
Yeah. So
holding map at 90-degree angle. The fuck is this shit?
all right. So it was time to do a land grab, right?
Yeah.
Stuffing my big minutes into episode before land grab counter.
So Alexander Cassett wanted the station to be at a very prestigious Park Avenue address, right? And the engineers told him, no, you can't do that. It's going to be too steep of a grade.
And Alexander Cassett said to himself, when people are drunk at 2 a.m. and need to piss on a building, not that I've ever done this, he said, wouldn't they rather piss on Park Avenue than anywhere else? Gentlemen, I give to you Park Avenue. And he took his dong out and pissed all over the floor.
It simply
you
occurred
do.
to him, why don't I use my massive, enormous hand that I have
Yes.
depicted here?
Depicted here, the huge hand.
I would pay good money for that hand. It would be very, very useful in a few places.
If I had a hand like Godzilla, yeah, I'd be unstoppable.
Yeah, but you'd
Just
have
the hand,
to
though.
all of
Just
your
the hand,
energy
though.
would be spent dragging that hand around
I
with the
wouldn't
rest of
drag
you.
it. I'd have some sort of, I don't know, splint, not
You
splint.
put it on a truck bed,
Yeah,
and the truck
something like that,
goes
yeah.
around next to you. Yeah,
So instead of putting the station on Park Avenue, they would have to
Sling
put it.
was the word I was thinking of.
They would have to put it in Manhattan's seedy, unfashionable, impoverished, crime-ridden, and generally unpleasant Tenderloin neighborhood.
yeah. There's
Right.
never anything tender about a neighborhood called the Tenderloin, is there?
Bro.
No,
Yeah,
the
don't
loin
call
is.
it that.
The
Yeah.
loin is tender.
No.
That's why it says it right there.
So there was a lot of issues with this site, not the least of which was the lack of subway access, right? But Penn Station, in Cassett's mind, was going to be a long-distance station first, right? So this is not so terrible. This is a big station catering to an exclusive clientele of long-distance riders. They're all going to arrive with luggage by cab, right? Right. So the first step was acquiring the land.
I assume this all was all gone about above board.
So the first thing the Pennsylvania Railroad
above
did was
board in
yeah.
that he pulls out his shotgun and says, "Give me your land, motherfuckers."
the first thing the Pennsylvania Railroad did was set up a company called the Stuyvesant Land Company, right?
Stuyvesant.
Stuyvesant, whatever.
It
it's
can't
called.
have been
Dutch.
that hard.
Yeah.
No wonder it's going to be so hard from today's land, because as you can see, there appears to be a Spanish imperial fortress holding guard over it in this image.
That's just whichever Vanderbilt firing off from the top of that.
Yeah.
Disco Elysium concept art always looks so good.
They set up a couple of small LLCs through a larger LLC, right? They sent out individual buyers to haggle for each individual building, right? They couldn't get all of them, but what they did do is get a representative sample of them that would be useful later, right?
Oh, Jesus.
In the meantime, they drummed up a new project, which is the Long Island Railroad was going to build a new terminal 20 blocks north at 50th Street, right? And the land value in that area shot up to a huge extent. Everyone's like, well, I know you need this building, therefore I'm going to charge you 4 times what it's worth for it, right?
Classic American speculation.
Yeah, but the numerous sales between 33rd and 31st and 9th and 7th Avenues, those went unnoticed, right?
By stealth and by guile, the Pennsylvania Railroad triumphs.
So they acquired a good representative sample of buildings, a good amount of the buildings in general, in fact, by December 1st, 1901, when the New York Tribune figured out the Pennsylvania Railroad was behind the purchases. And they said, my God, they're going to build the North River Bridge.
Oh.
Haha, bamboozled again.
Yeah.
I'm back, baby.
Alexander Cassett, the most devious genius of his age.
Yeah. The following day, the New York Times performed its intended duty of shitting all over the New York Tribune. Right? And they revealed that the bridge was off. The Pennsylvania Railroad was building a massive underground terminal, right? And Cassett took, because the New York Times was basically founded in response to the Tribune having Marx as a correspondent.
Yeah, and so it's also a convenient thing for the Pennsylvania Railroad to leak to.
This is true, yeah.
Well, Marx, that famous Russian.
Yeah, he was Russian. As we know. As we know, he was Russian. He was. Shut up.
Yeah, we here at the Times are the reasonable moderates about ideas like slavery, for instance. So the Pennsylvania Railroad was building this massive underground terminal. Alexander Cassett took this opportunity to graciously reveal the plans. He incorporated the Pennsylvania New York Extension Railroad Company, and now he had to do something difficult, which was actually get a charter to build the damn thing, right? The bridge had a federal charter, which meant they didn't have to worry about New York local politics too much. The tunnel did not, right? This meant that Alexander Cassett, who remember is one of these posh, mainline Protestant, square haircut guys, had to talk to Tammany Hall.
Yes.
If you want a good book, I don't even know if it's good, but if you want a book on why Tammany Hall is good, actually, Machine Made, highly recommend it.
I love Tammany Hall. I love machine politics. I love sending guys to vote in big beards and then shaving them around the back of the building to send them in to vote a second time. I love this shit so much. I've mentioned before that one of my primary things that I admire in politics is a healthy amount of corruption. I admire Huey Long for this. Yes. Same thing. I admire your boss Tweed thing where you nothing is too good for the workers and therefore we will provide them with this sort of marble palace which we have grifted every single fitting and fixture in there for 5,000 times its price.
So Cassett had stated publicly many times he was above bribery and working with the corrupt spoils system.
No, you're not. Shut up.
Which Tammany, of course, would have nothing to do with. They wanted those bribes. You need to pay off the right people.
Oh, yeah.
But these potentially tense political negotiations were cut short when the Tammany supported and first mayor of Greater New York. He was the first mayor after the 5 boroughs were consolidated. Robert Anderson Van Wyck, he was found to have rigged the price of ice.
Wait, what?
Yep. You could just rig the price of fucking anything back in those days.
Yeah. He had granted an effective monopoly to the American Ice Company to land ice at New York City's piers, right? And ice was a big deal. Everyone had ice boxes. There wasn't really mechanical refrigeration. So, of course, all this ice was being collected by people on grueling Arctic expeditions, right?
Yeah. What the hell else do you put in your G&T?
Exactly. So he had granted this one company a monopoly. And
spare a thought, even now, for the men who went out and sealskin parkas to hack the ice in your drink off of an iceberg.
Oh my God, I got a big chunk of ice. This one's got a penguin in it again.
Damn, that's the third one this month.
What do I do with this?
Have you ever seen Mr. Pepper's Penguins? That's what you do, Roz.
This penguin's been frozen for a month. I don't know if he's going to be able to do tricks. This was known as the Ice Truss Scandal, right? Van Wyck, I think, had made something like $480,000 personally off of the stock price increase of the American Ice Company.
It's a lot of money.
And this was in all of the papers, right?
Sure.
Because again, ice was a much more necessary commodity at the time, right? So in the next election, Van Wyck found him running against a reformist fusion candidate named Seth Lowe, right?
Hey, which now?
A reformist fusion candidate.
Yes.
He had like some features of traditional American diner cuisine, but also
yes,
really, really kick-ass sushi for some reason.
Yeah.
And topping it all off, the cook is Dominican. Doesn't make sense to us either.
It was a fusion candidate in the sense of fusion power.
So Seth Lowe had united the various warring anti-Tammany factions, right?
Who, I should be clear, were also as personally corrupt as Tammany was.
Generally speaking, yes. And Seth won the next election along with 39 of the 73 seats in the Board of Aldermen, right? Right, which is like New York's really big city council. Now, Seth Lowe himself was in support of the New York improvements, right? So the charter was now assured. All that was left was some horse trading over whether the Board of Aldermen or the Board of Rapid Transit would award the franchise, right?
Sure.
And the aldermen wanted all these unreasonable things, right? Like a union shop, an 8-hour day, preference to immigrant labor, so on and so forth. Well,
all of this unreasonable shit.
Yeah, those bastards.
Exactly. Well, the Board of Rapid Transit was full of good government types, right? Who didn't care about all that stuff, right?
They should be honest about it, you know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly. In the meantime, all the properties within the project boundaries were emptied. Extra police patrols had to be assigned to keep the peace in what was now 4 deserted blocks of the Tenderloin, right?
Oh, shit. That's like kind of a frightening vibe.
Yeah. Cassett agreed to several demands, such as an exorbitant rent to the city, or he described it as exorbitant, right? Supervision by the Board of Health, extra safety provisions in the tunnels, right? But he would not budge on any labor provisions.
Absolutely will not hire the Irish. Won't do it.
He was afraid the labor provisions would spread to construction projects on the rest of the railroad.
Ah.
Yes.
You let one of them in the door.
Mm-hmm.
I learned a thing today about Costco. That Costco bought stores that were already unionized and then basically gave all those benefits to non-union workers too, that they would never try to organize.
So the aldermen held firm, right? And so did Cassett. Cassett said, I'm fed up with this. Project's off. We're not coming to New York City. And everyone hated that, right? Labor hated it. Capital hated it. Tammany Hall hated it. All the reformers hated it. They all had lost something and gained nothing, right?
Yeah, if you're just taking your ball and going home. Like
Exactly. So the Board of Rapid Transit assumed jurisdiction and approved the project without conditions.
Nice.
Oh, there we go.
Liberalism.
Problem
Roll
solved.
straight over.
And after a little bit of extra politicking, the aldermen acceded the project would go on. They started acquiring property by eminent domain. Demolition proceeded immediately. In 1903, construction began in earnest. The first and hardest part was, of course, building the tunnels.
Oh, that's an awkward topography.
Yes. So what we are looking at here is a cross section of the entire tunnel profile, right? So there were 2 sets of tunnels that need to be built: the North River tunnels and the East River tunnels, right?
Right.
The North River tunnels were supposed to be the hard ones. They would be driven under the Hudson River through this horrible river silt that could give way at a moment's notice, right? And this required the use of tunneling shields, right? They didn't have tunnel boring machines then. It was like you had a shield in the front. You could open a little slat. Someone would take a little shovel and dig out 5 inches. They'd close it. They'd proceed to the next slat, right? Now, in some locations, the silt was so soft, they didn't actually need to excavate. They could just push on the shield.
Shove that bitch out. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, they just shove it forward with some hydraulic jacks, and all the silt oozed out around, and then they shoveled it into little narrow gauge train cars, removed it from the tunnel, right? In other locations, you did have to excavate, of course. Some days they made 15 feet a day. Some days they made 3. They would they put big cast iron rings behind the shield. Those were lined with concrete, including 2 benches on each side of the track. You can see these here. That was so if the train derailed, it would keep going straight as opposed to jackknifing and turning into tinder, right? Because they thought at the beginning they would be running wooden cars into this station. That didn't wind up happening, except for, I think, like the first year.
Yeah. Tinderbox in a tunnel.
Again, the North River tunnels were supposed to be the difficult ones. There had been several tunnels driven through the East River previously, and its soil mechanics were a little bit more well known. And in fact, there were some problems during excavating the North River tunnels. So when they were digging under Weehawken, which is where the Erie Railroad's terminal was, they caused a sinkhole. And a bunch of freight cars from the Erie Railroad fell in the tunnel.
Whoops.
That's good, right?
Oh, dear.
Well, free rail cars.
Yeah, free rail cars. This was while Erie Railroad high-up officials were touring the rail yard.
Ooh, never a good look.
Yeah, they just watched the freight cars fall in the sinkhole in front of them.
We own those.
Yeah.
Oh, hey, boss! Didn't know you guys were coming in today. Like trying to kick a rail car even further in the water.
This, just like in the tunnel with the rail cars. Like, this isn't necessarily related.
Maybe you overloaded them.
Yeah.
So they were not happy with that, but nevertheless, the North River tunnels proceeded rapidly and finished in 1906. They did find an unexpected problem when they were finished, though. The tunnel was found to be rising and falling slightly, just by a little tiny bit.
Because it's in like silt. It's not anchored very well.
It's
Right,
it's like anchored to more silt.
This explains my next question, which is going to be, why the hell have they screwed a pile through the bottom of the tunnel?
Well, these screw piles were intended to counteract this situation and never installed.
I've just been calling them orgies this whole time.
Yeah. So it took them 2 years to figure out why it took them 2 years to figure out why the tunnel was doing this. It was rising and falling with the tides, right? Eventually, there were some people who were worried this might make the tunnel unusable, but Samuel Reed was like, "Nah, this is fine. It hasn't worsened. It's probably good." Right. And
you've made God angry.
Yeah. Well,
kind of the art of getting away with it here.
The tunnels are 114 years old. It hasn't been a problem yet. So,
oh, okay.
Yeah.
Now, the East River tunnels were another matter.
I don't love the knowledge of how fragile that is, that it's just like in the silt and it just goes up and down with the tides.
Bouncy, bouncy, rolly, bouncy.
So the East River tunnels, there were 4 tubes that were going to be driven under the East River, 2 for the Long Island Railroad, 2 for the Pennsylvania, right? The engineer in charge was a guy named Alfred Noble.
Ah, that guy.
No, different guy.
Oh, not that guy.
No, not the dynamite guy. This is the guy who did the Sulaks and the Panama Canal. Right.
Surely the man with the plan.
The American Society of Civil Engineers does award a Nobel Prize every year.
just as a fuck you.
Yeah.
Doesn't quite pull the numbers.
Noble wanted all the tunnels to proceed at the same pace, right? So he frequently reassigned crews to different tunnel heads.
Why? Why is that used? What, for what benefit?
I don't know.
to do like muscle confusion on the silt.
The main thing this caused was confusion and delay.
Yeah.
Right. Not to mention some labor unrest.
Yeah.
And people weren't familiar with the crews they were going to be working with every night or every day, right? And they encountered some unexpected geology, right?
Oh, that's exactly what you want to encounter.
That's a sentence I want to hear.
So they encountered some pockets of sand and glacial till, right? And when that was entirely different from the silt. You wound up with blowouts. You wound up having pressure.
Blowouts?
Blowout is so these tunnels are pressurized while they're under construction to keep the water out, right?
Sure.
And so what happens in a blowout let me skip ahead in the notes a little bit. A blowout is when essentially the air finds a way out of the tunnel into the riverbed, and then it forms a big bubble that like
it's a queef. It's a queef.
Yeah, it goes straight up out of the river, and you get like a little geyser, right?
It's a queef.
Now, blowouts are a particularly nasty way to get killed. There's a number of ways to get killed in a blowout if you're Sandhog, right? The air pressure drops really rapidly. So you might get the bends. You get the bends. That's one option. The other option is that once the air pressure drops, the water rushes in and you drown, right?
I'd take that one.
Now, the third option is you get sucked up with the air pressure and then you wound up embedded in the riverbed.
Fuck
no. No, thank you.
Give me the bends.
Yeah.
I will take the bends.
I'll risk the bends at that point.
Now, there was one guy. This is in a different tunnel. This was...
How the fuck do you die in quicksand underwater? That's the worst shit I've ever heard.
There was one guy, when they were building the tunnel for what's now the 2 and 3 train in 1916, there was a Sandhog named Marshall Mabey, right, who got sucked out of the tunnel while in a blowout. And he was expelled from the East River in a 25-foot geyser.
Fuck no. Nope.
That's what the kids want these days.
Some guys...
I was looking for the drop as you said that.
He was picked up by some guys in a passing barge. They took him to the hospital. They found he only had some bruises. He was back to work the next day.
Give the guy a day off.
Nice.
Fuck.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, the only thing I have to say is...
Suck this place dry.
If you think we have time.
So anyway, in the East River tunnels, they had so many blowouts, they had to start staging barges above the tunnel head on the river to dump tons of cement
Why? You're
and
just going to
clay.
bump your head when you get spat out of there. Funk.
So that barge would, if there was a blowout,
How
they'd
was work?
immediately
You just come
dump.
home slurring. That's only sustained minor brain damage. Boss said it was fine.
The barges would be able to dump cement and clay over the blowout immediately to,
Crikey.
make the problem less bad. Although it didn't solve it, right?
You just still get the bends, and also like both your eardrums just get like fucked.
Yeah, you're
Yes.
fucked. You get turned into Elmo at that point.
The media did greatly exaggerate difficulties building the tunnels. They were very difficult to build, but the media was like, "Oh yeah, they killed 20 guys a day here," right? But they eventually shut up when the Pennsylvania Railroad hired our friend Ivy Ledbetter Lee, who, as we mentioned in 2 episodes ago, or the first Penn Central episode,
the Nazi guy.
The Nazi guy, yeah,
The
the
Nazi
guy.
guy.
He did PR for the Nazis later. He developed an innovative new way of quelling the press, which was called issuing a press release, right?
Oh, I thought you were going to say which was called murdering
Shooting
them.
them, yeah.
Just
No.
Yeah,
He was the guy who understood that the journalist is at heart lazy, and so if you give them an article that's already written, they'll print it.
Exactly.
Oh, wait. Whoa, there you go.
Yeah, so this method has been used to great success by corporations ever since, created a generation of lazy stenographers who call themselves journalists.
Mhm.
Anyway, so the East River tunnels were completed in 1908. This left the question of the station, right? Which is where we have to introduce an architecture firm.
Oh no.
So this is Charles Follen McKim, right? He was the son of Quaker abolitionists. This is William Rutherford Meade, a cousin of Rutherford Hayes, who was a questionably legitimate president of the United States who ended Reconstruction. And this is Stanford White, pedophile.
Of such things are architecture firms made. Two prodigious moustaches, an extremely well-supported dome of a head, and also pedophilia.
Yes. Together, they formed an architecture firm called McKim, Meade, and White, which
That's
is
like a whiskey.
Yeah, which was to become one of the most influential and respected architecture firms ever.
Is it
Now-
still around?
Sort of.
Oh, has it been like
Not-
amalgamated into something that's
It's-
like 6 letters or whatever?
No, it got the firm was renamed at some point,
Load-bearing nonsense.
and it may or may not. I don't think they exist in any meaningful form anymore.
Okay, sure.
Right, but their last like notable work was like 1960 something.
Oh,
And
pretty.
I mean, well, depending on who you are, you might argue their last notable work was like 1895.
New money trash.
Yeah. They got their start designing houses in what's called the shingle style, right? Throughout New England.
I hate it.
Yeah, in the 1880s.
What's wrong with shingle style?
I like
Ugh.
shingle style.
No.
Why?
This is the William Lowe House up here, right? Which is the most notable one. Here's the Isaac Bell House down here.
I like the top one. I don't like the bottom one.
Good news.
this is-
The William Lowe House was raised in 1962.
Yeah.
Hooray!
Oh my God. So, and they did a couple buildings you might call Richardsonian Romanesque, but they really made it big when they won the contract to
They did
design.
the Boston Public Library too, which I quite like.
They won the contract to design Madison Square Garden 2, right?
Madison
Over
Square Gardener.
Yes.
Madison Cube Garden. Come on, it was right there.
Vincent Scully, the architecture critic, saw once said about the William Lowe House as sort of once a climax and kind of conclusion for McKim, Mead, and White. Since it was almost immediately abandoned by the more conventionally conceived columns and pediments of McKim, Mead, and White's later buildings. Essentially, they stopped doing original things once they realized they could make money just doing Beaux-Arts, right?
Yeah.
I like this fucking like big Renaissance palazzo up here.
Oh yeah, I mean that's Madison Square Garden too. It's a fun little building, right? Well, not a little building; it's a big building, right?
It's a fun little big building.
Yeah.
So the campanile on the top,
They started doing much more formal, like Beaux-Arts style buildings because they had much more prestigious clients. They made a lot more money. They could do bigger buildings. So stuff like the entire campus of Columbia University, for instance. Here's the agricultural building at the World's Columbian Exhibition in Chicago, which Louis Sullivan said set back American architecture by 50 years.
Sort of Brighton Pavilion, but less imaginative.
Yeah. The firm only got more prestigious after something called the Trial of the Century. And that was the criminal trial after...
Oh, this is his favorite thing.
Yeah. That was the criminal trial after Stanford White was murdered by Harry Kendall Thaw on the roof of his own building, Madison Square Garden 2, in front of an audience for being a pedophile.
I mean, yeah, you go with
victimless
that.
crime.
Yeah.
Crime. Advanced form of self-defense. No jury would convict.
It's a little more complicated than that. Harry Kendall Thaw also had some proclivities.
Wasn't someone fucking someone's sisters?
They were like fighting over a child at the time. Great.
Stanford White had fucked Harry Kendall Thaw's wife while she was 16.
Oh wait, I know about this because I know about the fucking wife too. She was like an early celebrity, right?
Yes.
Fucking Evelyn Nesbit, right?
Yes, Evelyn
Holy
Nesbit.
crap.
Jesus, pulling that shit from that was amazing.
No, because I read Greg Jenner's book, Dead Famous: A History of Celebrity, and Evelyn Nesbit and her fucking like pedophilic love triangle is like sort of the prototypical early 20th century like debutante celebrity thing. It's like she was one of the first models, even.
Yeah. Oh wow. I mean, nothing changes. Yeah.
The murder itself was when Thaw shot White in front of a whole bunch of people, they all thought it was a fun...
he shot him. That's disappointing. I was hoping it would have been knife. There we are.
Well, they all thought it was some kind of fun party trick, and they all applauded.
Like
and I realized, wait, that was a murder.
Yeah, he approached him, produced the pistol, said, "You've ruined my wife," which is the weirdest possible thing you could say, and then shot him twice in the face and once in the chest.
Now this happened.
I gotta ask a question though. Why stop at 3? You're already like, all right, I'm going to murk this dude on a rooftop.
With,
like,
with a 1906 pistol, you're taking your life in your hands for each time you pull that trigger.
I know that's
right?
true, but like,
yeah, well, I'm cranking the big knob that says gunshots to see if I get applause or not, So this happened in the middle of the Penn Station project, which is also another interesting thing, is that Harry Kendall Thaw was the son of a major Pennsylvania Railroad freight forwarder. A little awkward.
Kind of like, the planning meetings were a bit weird once, like, one of the architects has been shot in the face by one of the clients.
Oh, no, you just do a weekend of Bernie's type of thing. It's fine.
So, but when they were designing the station, right? So Alexander Cassett didn't know shit about architecture or architecture firms, but he wanted to rival the New York Central's under construction Grand Central Terminal. And Samuel Rhee suggested, why don't you use McKim, Mead, and White? And this was a match made in heaven because Cassett didn't know shit about architecture, and McKim, Mead, and White had never designed a train station.
Hell yeah.
Perfection. Absolute perfection.
The blandest possible station, please.
Yeah. So Cassett's intention, you have a grand entrance to New York City for long distance and intercity travelers, and only intercity and long distance travelers, right? Commuters would, of course, continue using Exchange Place for convenient ferries and the new Hudson and Manhattan Railroad tubes to access the financial district, which is where the jobs were, right? So the station was designed as such. Now, Charles McKim got the broad outlines of the station and talked Cassett out of the most stupid things he suggested. Put a hotel on top. No.
Hey, it worked for some Pancras.
Yeah. Well, it worked for most things. And Charles McKim was like, no, we're gonna keep this low slung and Greco-Roman as fuck. Right.
It's a fucking it's a curia for trains.
Yes.
Those big arch windows. I mean, yeah.
Yeah. So, he talked him out of the hotel on top. He talked him out of cheaping out on the main waiting room because Cassett wanted to keep this low slung instead of having the massive Diocletian windows. Now, the responsibility for the design of the station was divided vertically, right? Everything below street level was the railroad's problem, and everything above street level was the architect's problem, right? And there's a lot of stuff that wasn't worked out until last minute. So, for example, it wasn't until they were actually building the platforms that someone was like, these should probably be high-level platforms and not flat platforms that are like on the ground, right? Where you have to step up onto the train, right? The overall design was, again, it was focused on one type of traffic, the one that was the railroad expected to increase indefinitely, which is the long-distance passenger, right?
That seems sustainable.
Yeah, obviously. You're never going to have a reduction in long distance rail traffic.
Never.
Never ever. So
you've prepared a little like virtual tour for us here.
I got a virtual tour of the old Penn Station, right? So let's say you enter through the front door here, right? And you go through this sort of Doric, not quite temple front. I don't know what you call it when there's not a pediment on there. Right.
Front
this is like a colonnade, I guess.
Yeah, this whole thing is made out of pink granite, just a little bit pink, right? But you got this sort of austere Doric thingamajig, right? So we're on the plan, we're over here, right? And we proceed forward through the long shopping arcade, right?
Oh.
Okay, yeah. So even back then, the train station was a mall.
Yeah.
Right?
Did it have a Pizzeria Uno at least?
No.
Rat bastard Nazis.
I don't think they'd invented it yet.
I'm thinking invented rat bastard Nazis yet. It was 1911.
Also true. Now,
they're getting there.
So yeah.
Yeah, exactly. They haven't quite gotten there yet. They got to do World War I first.
About the time that John Moses Browning was about to invent a much more effective way to shoot pedophiles in the face.
Now, if you were arriving, if you were the sort of clientele which the station was really designed for, you might bypass the shopping arcade entirely. You might arrive by cab, which went down a big ramp, right, that delivered you directly into the main concourse here, right?
There's nowhere to sit down. Sick of this
rather
anti-homeless bullshit.
Oh,
or excuse me,
And
not
they make
main concourse.
They
This
make
is the
cities
general.
worse for everyone.
This is the general waiting room. Excuse
If
me.
I want
There
to
was-
sit down,
scale.
I have to buy some food, and like because it's 1911, the place that I buy food from is called like Harry's Horse Meat Pies.
Yeah, you got it a Horn and Hardart automat.
Trophy O'Hooligan's Irish pub. Yes.
Yeah.
and the scale is quite something. I mean, at least the trad arch people are happy anyway.
Mhm.
Return.
So yeah, the idea is you start to proceed downwards as you approach the trains, right? You go into this space. This is based on the baths of Carcalla or the Tepidarian of that.
I knew I was
Right.
I knew I wasn't crazy. It's not a curia. It's a baths.
It's a bath. It's a Tepidarium, but it's 20% larger than the original.
Uh-huh.
You got your big columns. You got your Diocletian windows. You got your coffered groin vaults, right?
It's supposed to be architecturally, it's a tepidarium, and yet when I take all my clothes off and start striggling myself in there, people act as if I'm insane.
You got a statue of Alexander Cassett himself here in a niche.
Obviously,
One of the few statues in there. I think Samuel Rhee was on the other side because I think both of them died before it was finished. It's a big dumb Beaux-Arts space, right? And if you wanted seating for ticketed passengers, we're in here, right? For ticketed passengers, here's the women's waiting room, and here's the men's waiting room. Yeah. I don't know what happens if you want to, wait together.
No.
Shot.
Yeah,
Not acceptable.
Not acceptable. All right. So once we've gone through here, you could get tickets over here, right? Once we've gone through the general waiting room, you go to the concourse, right? Which is your big glass groin vaulted sort of thing, right? It's all made out of
it's a bit
steel.
Paddington-y.
Yeah, a little bit.
And you could see, the trains and, walk down the stairwell there. Right.
I wonder who made that clock.
I believe it would be Benrus.
An excellent clock. This is my favorite bit so far. This is nice. This is a nice train shed.
Oh, yeah. This is a very nice train shed. You could, all the floors were made out of little glass blocks. So when you went down to platform level, you had lots of light.
Oh, hell yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I love that.
The columns have this sort of deliberately industrial look, which was very uncharacteristic for McKim.
That's good.
This was sort of it's one of these buildings which is sort of transitional from, sort of a formal Beaux-Arts to like this is the high tech space where the electric trains are, right?
Sort of business in the front, party in the back, sort of thing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right.
Also, some seriously nice looking slab track there. Just gonna,
Oh yeah.
Since you've got me on, be rude not to.
So there's an upper concourse for arrivals. Hold on, I forget. The upper concourse is for departures. The lower concourse was for arrivals, right? So this was all separated, right? Just to for extra space, right? Now,
and the effect is you come in and you like descend the stair, right?
Yes,
like a debutante. Yes,
or you take an elevator. There were also elevators.
That's not as glamorous, Russ.
Well, you might have a bunch of luggage.
Fuck
we'll
you.
get to that problem in a second.
No. Your servant fucking has the luggage.
Yeah, or you have a
they
Pullman
get the
porter.
elevator. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Apparently, there was a big shortage of them for most of the station's existence. So you descended the stairs to the most modern trains in existence, right? This is a DD1 electric locomotive, right? Ran off a third rail. You can see it's one of the old timey ones where there's a big motor in the middle and the wheels are driven by a jack shaft.
Looks.
Oh, crikey. It's
looks like
they've gone make the steam train, but it's not a steam train style.
It's electric now. Yeah.
It's wild. It's like a big insectoid submarine.
I'm so happy to see you.
And these brought you as through the North River tubes as far as Manhattan Transfer in Harrison, New Jersey. The train would stop. They'd put a steam locomotive on. You'd have passengers who joined the train at that point if they had commuted by the Hudson and Manhattan Railroad from the financial district, right? Then you're brought swiftly to your destination, Pittsburgh, Washington, D.C., Philadelphia, Chicago, or whatever, right? And this is a very grand and extremely impressive journey for the long-distance traveler. You also had these brand new steel cars here, right?
This is crazy expensive, right? I assume.
Yeah, this is all very, very new, very expensive. No one thought you could build a steel rail car before they actually started doing it because they thought it would be too rigid and it would shake itself apart.
Once again, Alice theory is vindicated.
Yeah. So this is the experience for the long distance traveler.
I'm noticing a general omission of the experience for anyone else.
All right. Now, if you're taking the Long Island Railroad in here, you get you get dumped into one of the side tracks under a street, right? And then they put you in the lower concourse and they say, go to the subway. Go to the subway right now.
I smell crazy in there.
You rat.
You rat. You piece of shit.
Yeah.
You
The
deserve
cops
to suffer.
are allowed to hit you with like whips on your way there.
Yeah, they're hitting you with like
Come on,
branches.
poor person.
Yeah.
Come on, poor. This
They
is
for
for
sure
people.
invented a new
This
form
is
of
for
cop for this,
people.
surely.
Yeah, this must be about the time of the rise of the transit cop, right?
Yeah.
The systematization and the professionalization of railroad police.
Oh no, railroad police had been like around since like the Civil War. Yeah.
The subway specific one.
Well, you could you go to the Railroad Museum of Pennsylvania. They have a old timey Pennsylvania Railroad police cop uniform on display, and it's got like a Nazi armband, but with a keystone on it.
Yeah, it's not great optics.
I mean, didn't the federal government take the title special agent for its investigators off of the Union Pacific Police too?
That sounds about right to me.
Oh my.
Now, even then, the old Long Island Railroad Concourse, it was a dark and dingy. It wasn't as dark and dingy as it could have been because you still got the glass blocks up there, right? You see this nice old timey elevator shaft here, right?
It looks like steerage in the Titanic.
Yeah, that's the sort of feeling we're getting here, right? It's very functional.
I mean, I don't hate the aesthetic, but it's
You were allowed to glimpse upwards the nice people.
You could experience being trampled underfoot by capital.
Hey, don't laugh. This is exactly what the HS2 station at Euston will be. More of that later.
Another part of the station was building the New York Connecting Railroad, right? In 1917, they opened the New York Connecting Railroad, which we mentioned before, connecting the New Haven Railroad to the terminal, making it possible to take one train from Boston to New York City to Washington, D.C., right? It also facilitated a bunch of freight operations on Long Island, but the big one was Gustav Lindenthal finally got his bridge.
Hooray!
The Hellgates.
Oh,
Yeah.
come on, man. That's not Mega Bridge.
Paint that bridge, please. I'm
I think
begging you.
I think this is right before they comprehensively painted it. It looks better
Also,
now.
are these men playing cricket
Yes.
in the United States of
you
America?
fucking
There's
dweebs.
yes, there's a cricket field at the base of the
God. Play
Hellgate
football.
Bridge.
Yes, I
Ridiculous.
know it's probably very important to the diaspora, but I'm begging you to play football instead.
I always thought if you played cricket in the United States, a bunch of guys would show up in black vans and send you to a black site.
Yeah.
You're not allowed to have that knowledge here.
Absolutely.
If
Wait,
you-
so this is 1917.
Mm-hmm.
When did that was the connecting railroad in 1917? But when did the actual station open for passengers?
Station opened 1910.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I'm consumed with visions of an American with an American accent saying things like a sticky wicket or silly mid-on, and I'm just it doesn't work. This is psychic violence that I've inflicted upon myself here.
Hey, it's Brooklyn. I got 293 runs. Hey.
Next slide, please.
So yeah, they opened the station to public 1910 after both Cassett and Charles McKim were dead.
Rip.
Yeah, this is another another project which killed a lot of people.
And
Cool
digital clock in the background there.
Oh yeah.
Oh shit! Nice. Yeah.
This is a later photo of the station.
Boo.
Now they had some problems with the station almost immediately, right? Some of which were pretty minor. The skylights leaked. All
Standard.
of them. That's every skylight leaks. Yeah,
it's normal.
The bi-level design was confusing to some passengers.
Oh no!
You had an inherent problem with the design that the vertical distance from the street level to the platform was very high, 45 feet from platform to surface. And they sort of tried to mitigate that with this long processional entrance, but also that meant you had to walk pretty far to the platform. The station as built had only one escalator, right? Which, if you want to move a lot of people over a vertical distance, you use escalators, right? They're the most efficient way of moving a lot of people over a vertical distance. And you have an elevator for like disabled people or people who need to use a wheelchair, right? But you have the escalator moves a shitload of people really efficiently, and they only had one of them, right?
Yeah.
Oh dear.
You only need one. Saves weight.
Well, I mean, there's a lot of platforms.
Saves weight, Roz.
So all these passengers are like hauling their own luggage up and down all these stairs all the way up to the street.
No, their porters are doing it for them, Roz.
They were always short of porters, though.
Yeah, because everybody looks at it and they're like, who the fuck would want this job?
Those goes.
Yeah. They had a lot of elevators. Most of them were dedicated to baggage and express freight. They later installed a whole bunch of escalators, but the big problem was still coming, right? So that Penn Station was designed.
Too.
Penn Station was designed for.
Sorry, I had a mouthful of meat there. You've killed me.
God.
I'm dead.
There we go.
It's your own time you're wasting.
Liam.
You're welcome.
Penn Station was designed for long distance trains. The long distance train shows up to the platform. They idle there for a while. They get loaded up with staff and supplies. The passengers board pretty leisurely. The train leaves.
It's like a cruise ship. It's like a cruise ship.
And that means you can get away with having a lot of narrow platforms instead of a few wide ones, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, because this one's going to New York, this one's going to like Buffalo, this one's going to Chicago, whatever.
Yeah,
I assume it doesn't, but does this have anything to do with the madhouse that is boarding at Penn Station today?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Okay.
So,
there you go.
Yeah, at this point, you might be running, you're running long distance trains once, twice a day. Maybe it's busy, you're running some extras. So, you don't have to run a whole bunch of trains frequently off of these platforms, at least as it was intended, right? But it's very at odds with the commuter train, right? Which arrives, it farts out as many passengers as possible, as quickly as possible, right? Then needs to quickly take on passengers going the opposite direction, at least in theory. Or it runs through, and through running at Penn is a problem we'll get to later. But that requires large platforms for the passengers to spread out and a way for them to quickly get to the concourse and get the fuck out of the station, right?
Sure.
Now, Penn Station was completed before it got any subway connections, and it functioned as intended for a while, right? But fairly shortly afterwards, the 7th Street IRT line arrived in 1917 with a shuttle to Times Square, and then they opened the full line in 1918. The independent subway 8th Avenue line, that's the ACE trains, opposed to the 123 trains before, that showed up in 1932. All of a sudden, for some reason, and no one could have predicted this, but suddenly the Long Island Railroad Flatbush Terminal and the Pennsylvania Railroad's Exchange Place were suddenly a lot less attractive for commuters.
But it's the place where you exchange. It says in the name.
Didn't you guys read?
Not anymore.
That's where they're supposed to go. Why did the commuters not pay attention to where they're supposed to be?
Yeah.
I love the idea of like a SEPTA study or something that's like, we can't do this because all passengers are idiots. We would be a much better railroad if we simply did not allow passengers.
That is the general Class 1 railroad opinion.
Yeah. That's not far off. Pleased to announce my new role at Norfolk Southern.
The number one rule about running a profitable railroad is not to run any trains, right?
Congratulations on your role as senior vice president of putting coal trains on the ground.
Yeah.
The other issue was the station itself had spurred a bunch of development in Midtown, right? Areas like Times Square suddenly became much more prestigious, and you had like these Midtown skyscrapers showed up, like this Chrysler building,
like
the
old
Empire
photos
State Building
of Times Square. It looks like a giant pile of shit. Looks like 10 pounds of shit in a 5-pound bag.
Don't worry, it still does.
You see, it was 10 pounds of shit in a 5-pound bag, and then it got nice, and then it got shitty again, and now it's nice again, which sucks.
Yeah, it was strange. Like, read Times Square Red, Times Square Blue for some like authentic 1980s, 70s, and 80s filth.
Roz is only mad because he is banned from life from the Times Square M&M store.
Is the Times Square M&M store at all like the Leicester Square M&M store, kind of like tourist flypaper?
Yeah. I like it there, which probably says more about me than it does about the Mars Corporation.
Yeah, I was way too into the green M&M.
You and Tucker Carlson.
Anyway, and so the station spends most of its life doing something it's not intended to do, right?
Same.
Which is commuter trains. And they start trying to modify it over time, right? So, for instance, they installed overhead wire for trains that went as far as Washington, D.C. and Harrisburg and New Haven, right? And that meant they had to enclose the concourse, no more light open and airy stuff, because otherwise people would trip and fall on the wires and die, right?
Who cares?
They installed some escalators in the 1930s, which I really like the contrast of the escalator with the big Beaux-Arts, bullshit.
I do too, but like weirdly steep compared to the stairs.
Yeah. You don't have to walk down them. You don't need the rest of the landing, right?
Yeah.
They started putting advertisements in there, and all the advertisements were for cars and airlines.
For God's sake.
World War II was really hard on the building. The big glass concourse had to be painted black in case of an air raid. And they
from where?
Yeah, by
the
what?
America
From
bomber.
where?
The America bomber.
Yeah, you never know when the Zeros are going to show up out of nowhere. And in the meantime,
we'll simply light them on fire.
In the meantime, the railroad itself was increasingly divesting from its unprofitable commuter trains, right? And they were only operating them where required by law. So the Pennsylvania Railroad had purchased new MP-54 multiple unit cars. Those are the ones we saw for the Long Island Railroad before.
Yeah.
They bought them in 1908. They bought identical cars in 1915 and 1926.
Oh, right? Dear.
The Long Island Railroad bought identical cars, the last delivered in 1930. And these were the last commuter cars either railroad bought until they were sort of forced to in the 50s, right? And as these cars aged, their reliability decreased. Commuter service became more expensive to operate, more unreliable, less profitable, less pleasant to use, right?
I mean, you can see by that picture is showing a busy station, right?
Yes.
So unprofitable, but clearly highly in demand.
Yeah. I mean, you had sort of the it's like Yogi Berra said. Nobody goes there anymore. It's too crowded.
Yeah.
Because you were running fewer and fewer commuter trains, and so everyone was packing on to fewer and fewer trains, right? So the service was worse, and only the people who absolutely needed to use the service were using it. Of course, they couldn't afford
the whole
to pay.
time they're being advertised to as why if you drove, you'd be home by now.
Exactly. Because you're also building big highway projects. Automobile travel is more accessible. Airlines are taking away the high wealth intercity travelers, which Penn Station was designed for, right?
It's not even Moses' time yet, and it's still the trajectory is being set.
Well, Moses had built a whole bunch of parkways in Long Island, which definitely took away from the Long Island Railroad commuters. Jersey was still fucked.
But if you're Don Draper, you're trying to get home from Madison Avenue to Ossining, then yeah.
The biggest intervention came in the 50s. The general waiting room was renovated with a new ticket counter called the clamshell. That's this right here, right? Which sort of blocked the grand procession with the large cantilevered steel awning in the shape of an airfoil.
Why?
Airline stuff.
It's indoors.
Modernity.
Yeah, I know, right? It's modernity, right? They wrapped all the columns in plastic so they were easier to clean.
Oh,
But
come
the thing is,
on.
they wrapped all the dirt in there, so they weren't cleaned at all. The station was covered in grime and dirt and nicotine, right? Because everyone's smoking in there because it's the 50s. It looked like
pink granite with an inch thick layer of tobacco
just
on it.
Yellow, yeah. So it looked like hell. It
Looks
was really
good
crowded.
to me.
It was obviously falling apart, and the railroad didn't maintain it because it didn't want it and didn't need it and didn't make money off of it, right? The Pennsylvania Railroad was trying to end all commuter service as early as the late 1950s. I mean, they just wanted the station gone. If they had their druthers, they would abandon the whole New York connecting railroad. But the only thing that kept the trains running were legal mandates.
Right.
And even as ridership was declining, as I mentioned before, the trains were getting more crowded. But the city couldn't force the railroad to maintain the station or to keep it around. So in 1954, the air rights were sold to a guy named William Zeckendorf, right? Those plans for redevelopment fell through. But in 1962, a better offer came around.
Hooray!
Madison Square Garden 4.
It's not even square.
It's not square. It's
square.
Round.
I don't see any squares there.
Madison Circle Garden.
James Nolan, sell the team.
So the Pennsylvania Railroad executives and the railroad itself both had shares in these things called the New York Islanders and the New York Knicks. Right? And they both needed a new stadium. Why not put it on top of that useless old railroad terminal?
I have reasons.
I hate the fucking aisles. Is that good enough?
So a guy named
With apologies to our former roommate, fuck your hockey team.
A guy named Irving M. felt the same way, right? In return for the air rights, he'd offered the railroad a brand new air-conditioned station at no cost and a 25% stake in the new Madison Square Garden. And the Pennsylvania Railroad's new CEO, Stuart T. Saunders, thought it was a great deal.
Ugh.
So the contract was signed. Penn Station was coming down. The same Stuart Saunders who just, come in from Norfolk and Western to manage the Penn Central merger, of course.
Guy who looked a bit
How
like
much of
even
the
more
aisles
evil
and
Dick
Knicks-
Cheney.
How much of the aisles and the Knicks does a PRR own at this point?
I don't remember the stake offhand.
Okay.
But it was less than 50%, but it was a good chunk.
Yeah.
And I'm sure the executives owned a whole bunch through their investing club, right?
Sure.
Now, the New York Times editorial board wrote that, until the first blow fell, no one was really convinced that Penn Station would be demolished or that New York would permit this monumental act of vandalism against one of the largest and finest landmarks of its age of Roman elegance, right?
Yeah, there was this campaign to save Penn Station, right?
Oh, yeah, there was a campaign to save Penn Station and had some pretty wild people in it. But, one of the things they did is they kept the station open while they were demolishing it. So every day you walked in.
They killed it with its eyes open.
Everything got a little shittier. You could see sort of the condition of the station when they were demolishing it. Everything's covered in grime. It's all nasty and dirty.
It's interesting 'cause it's happening at pretty much exactly the same time as the old Euston was being pulled down in London, and which also was like this kind of Greco-Roman sort of monument. I mean, it was a shit station, frankly, but it was.
But it was our shit station, yeah.
It's our shit station. God damn it!
No, you can trust me.
You can see. I
hate the fucking jaunty advertisement hoarding on the front for the new Madison Square Garden Sports Center.
Is that a GG1 on it though?
Yes. Over here, you'd be able. Well, it's a new air-conditioned station they're offering you. Consider that. And you can see here's one of the columns being removed on the interior. You can see it's plaster around a steel beam.
Oh, those cheating bastards!
Yeah, a lot of it is sort of it was.
It's a set. It's just a set.
It is. It was just a set. I mean, although one of the weird things is if you look at it now, this kind of plaster work, it's very hard to do. You need a 90-year-old Italian man to do it. I mean, it's a set piece, but it's set. We can't even do the set piece anymore too easily. So yeah, it took a couple years to take it down. They built the stadium within the footprint of the station as it was being demolished.
Oh, that sucks too.
Because the front is actual granite, and it was really hard to tear down.
Why didn't they just leave it at that point? That could have been cool.
That would have been kind of cool, actually. Yeah,
because we can't have nice things, Gareth. Come on now.
Now, Irving Felt said he believed that the gain from the new buildings and the sports center would more than offset any aesthetic loss. And he said 50 years from now, when it's time for Madison Square Garden to be torn down, there'll be a new group of architects who protest. Yeah, no.
Wrongo.
So there's a facet of protest that a lot of people focus on here, which is we had a lot of architects, architecture critics, people like that come out to save Penn Station, right? So, here's a photo here here's Jane Jacobs, right? Here's noted fascist sympathizer Philip Johnson.
Oh dear.
I feel like less publicized is a sort of long, slow simmering protest from people who actually, use the trains, for which this is more than like an aesthetic loss. It's an active degradation of train service, right?
Yeah, like tens of thousands of workers a day.
You're talking hundreds of thousands of people each day, right?
Oh, they don't matter. They don't matter. Where's their fucking architecture journal, huh? If they're so smart.
Yeah, I mean, the implication here is buy a car. Fuck you, right?
Jeez.
Haven't you said fuck you, buy a car to some people, Roz? Yes, you have.
The Amish are different. So, but the Penn Station that was coming was an objectively worse station from a lot of aspects, right? And everyone involved in this process was worse off at the end of it, except for a few Pennsylvania Railroad executives, right? This is just, it's an indignity that was, forced on a lot of people. I mean, obviously Penn Station is, it was designed as this sort of upper class, a portal to the city, which was only for, the best of the best. But what it turned into was, this is the space where everyone goes. And, there's some amount of, what do you call it? You entered the city with, this certain amount of dignity, right? And now
luxury. New York City with dignity.
No,
that's true.
To what extent was that? Was there kind of an inverse snob, or not an inverse snobbery, a snobbery over that? And suddenly the workers and the working class was using this sort of grand edifice that was supposed to be for the no, this is darling. This is supposed to be for the middle classes.
Yeah, sorry.
Need about an hour more of Gareth's posh voice.
Well, I think we should tear it down and we'll build JFK Airport.
I've got a long stick with a cigarette for some reason stuck in the end of it while I'm saying it.
So yeah, everyone was worse off from this except for the people who directly profited off the real estate development. And I guess the Knicks fans and Islanders fans could get to the stadium really quick, conveniently. Right? Yeah. Yeah, so they demolished this thing and they put the station in the basement. It's been largely unaltered since then, right? Vincent Scully, who also previously criticized McKim, Mead, and White for their shitty Beaux-Arts architecture, said, one entered the city like a god, one now scuttles in like a rat. So maybe he's not. Maybe he's not that critical of McKim, Mead, and White's Beaux-Arts architecture.
I mean, I kind of have to say, maybe we'll touch on this again later, but I'm not a fan of the Beaux-Arts architectural style. It's a bit gross. But you don't have to bury it under the ground for it to be there is a middle ground. Yeah. Oh man, you don't have to just bury the whole thing underneath sports real estate. Not necessary.
And this is where we get to the new Penn Station, right? Where they took all the minor problems were made worse and none of the major problems were solved, except now the station was air conditioned, right?
Great. It looks great. I love it. I'm really happy with this.
I prefer this concourse to Moynihan. We'll get to that. What you have now is a whole station that's sort of like the original Long Island Railroad concourse. You know, it's a rat's warren of tunnels. The hallways are confusing. They lead nowhere. You have to rely entirely on signs to figure out where you are. The concourses are all like kludges. Like the entire New Jersey Transit concourse was just
I hate a kludged concourse.
It was like carved out of a storage room one day. There's no central plan to work off of. There's no clear procession through the station. You don't know where you are a lot of times when you're in here, right?
Nope.
It's utilitarian, but without the utility part, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's Tarian.
So in the meantime, of course, Penn Central failed. Commuter trains were taken over by the state of New Jersey, the city of New York. Long distance service was taken over by Amtrak. They all set about their own plans to use or improve the station. And this is where I think we'll divert from the usual sentimental crap about the head house. And we'll give it to Gareth. Let's talk about what makes a train station work.
Yes. Oh, yeah, it's my business. Right. So this is going to be quick. I thought I would adopt Justin's Socratic method and go, what is a station?
What is
so here's
a station?
one of those.
It's where trains live.
It's
exactly.
It's a flatbed next to a rail where you have like you spill a couple of things on the track.
Yeah,
Apparently,
you spill things out of your wagon, and some of them might walk, and others you might need to get a guy to move. So here's one of the smallest ones in the UK. This is Bewley Station, North Inverness, and it really pushes the limits on what you can define as a station. Although it does have a platform, so that's better than some stations I've seen. Here's a station. So right, this next bit's going to be very quick. So next slide, please.
All right.
There we go. So this is so here you have a track. There's a nice track, right? And then the previous station, as we saw. So if we go to the next slide, this is going to be super quick fire. You see, we can insert a platform. So if you have a train coming along on this single line track, it can stop, people can get out, or they can get on, and the train can move, and it goes in either direction. And this is, well, if you've got a single track, obviously it's very low capacity because that train it has to go miles away somewhere else before it can go past another train going the other direction. So that's where you get clever. And next slide, please. Introduce another track.
Ooh.
Multi-track drifting.
I know, right?
And actually, that brings back the first problem.
Yeah. My first ever train crash I witnessed was in Inverurie. And it was indeed a Class 170 doing double track drifting. Because it split the points and stayed on track, but smashed up a signal and some location cases. So yes. Anyway, I digress. Next slide, please. So you can see you can add the platforms, and then therefore you have a station where on one side you get onto a train going one direction, on the other side you go onto a train going the other direction. It's very, very simple. But that's fine if you've only got one kind of train, right? But what happens if you have another kind of, if you have trains maybe that you want to keep going through without stopping, and then trains that you do want to stop? Next slide, please.
Oh, you got to have an up, down, and up, an up, down. Fuck, cut all of this. I sound stupid. An up fast and an up slow line, and a down fast and a down slow line.
Exactly.
Yes.
You have a loop, and you have a station loop, and yeah, so exactly. You could have the up and down slow in if you're in the UK and name things weirdly. So yeah, in blue here is our stopping train, and then you've got the white tracks for whatever other stuff you want to send through, whether it's freight or maybe fast trains or whatever.
Well, in Pennsylvania railroad parlance, this would probably be 1, 2, 3, and 4, because they numbered the tracks in order of when they were built.
Up and down, fast and slow is kind of like a cricket thing, I feel like, by comparison. If you use it in the US, you do get like black-sighted.
Yeah, they drag you into the van, and Liam's in there actually to take you somewhere fun.
No, Liam's here. Liam escaped from the van. Don't worry about Liam.
Oh, good.
I thought you're driving the van.
Yeah, because it's your van.
Oh, yeah, no, that makes a lot more sense. I don't want to be the... I wouldn't have wanted to be in the back of my van when I owned it. I was always pretty concerned for my passengers.
The problem with this station is that there's a lot of time to take. Trains have to slow down. They have to negotiate their way through the switch, then go sit by the platform, then negotiate their way back onto the track. Actually, this can be quite problematic for line capacity. If you've got like a mixture of trains going through and trains stopping, this is actually a bit crap. So next slide, please. What you can do is introduce So kind of exactly what Alice was saying. You have a proper slow and fast line. So you can have
more tracks.
More
Just
tracks.
do this.
More
have more
tracks.
tracks. The trains that don't stop keep themselves on the middle track, the two like middle tracks in white there, and then the blue tracks have your like commuter trains or your suburban trains or whatever the passenger trains that want to stop at the station.
Also has the fun little advantage that when you're standing on one of those platforms waiting for your nice slow commuter train, you don't get like all of your shit blown past by like a 125 mile an hour express train.
I was for bizarre reasons, I was in Milton Keynes last week doing a lecture. And I didn't expect to see this, but from Milton Keynes Central Station, trains go through there real fast. I think they're at full 125 miles an hour. And someone was standing not even the wrong side of the yellow line. And they just squeezed their coffee and it just sprayed all over their own face when the train went through. I was like, oh, I'm in a weird sort of rom-com sort of from the late 90s with this sort of skit. Anyway, so yes, you've got fast and slow lines and they kind of keep themselves, which is good. You'd think that's good, right? But next slide, please.
What if we've got to stop an express train somewhere?
Yes, if you have the issue where you do need to get some stuff onto this, into these platforms to stop, or maybe you need to have them like mediums, like kind of like some trains stop there, and you've got to get the faster trains to go through, or like semi-fast, or whatever bizarre names you want to call the services. The trouble is, if you want to do that without clogging everything up, like the station we had earlier, you're going to need to put in longer switches. By which I mean, the trains can go through these switches faster, but that means that they're longer and more complicated. So, so that you can start having challenges here, and this gets more expensive. But you still have a pretty good operational station. Like, this layout's pretty good, actually. This is a pretty good station. Next slide, please. There are other alternatives. If, for example, you've got a situation where you have two fast lines, but in a pair, and then you've got the two slower lines, the two kind of commuting lines, but kind of running together like this, you might have a layout a bit like this, where you've got kind of a separate, maybe fenced-off set of fast lines, and then a pair of kind of slow lines together. You see lots of these in the UK. You probably see loads of these in the US as well, right? It just depends on what the operational layout is at the railway. But you might see this layout.
You don't see this too much in the US because we don't have separate fast and slow lines.
No, they're just all slow, Gareth.
A lot of suburban London stations are like this. Like, my commute to school was like this, where you had like one platform for like that was nominally for a slow line that backed onto the express lines also.
Yeah,
you might see
like the east side of Crossrail has loads of platforms like this. So they like nominally got a platform that you could use, but it's like 30 centimeters wide, and it's for the fast trains. And then the wider ones, they've got the slow trains coming through, and they've kind of got a fence blocking off the fast platforms.
I guess you kind of have this on the Washington Metro where it parallels the Northeast Corridor, but it's fairly clearly it's a nearby right of way. It's not the same right of way.
Yeah. So and again, next slide, please. You might find that you do have two sets of platforms because you have maybe one is semi-fast, or you've got maybe two operators, or you've got, I don't know, you've got London Overground and you've got Southern or whatever. It's some strange situation where you've got two different systems running.
And Southeastern, the two least complementary liveries.
Oh my goodness, yes. So that's fine. If you've got the two systems separated, then okay, fine, you can have them like this. And actually, okay, I didn't include it, but you could get really fancy and start having exchange platforms where actually they like loop over each other, and it all starts getting very clever. But if you have a situation, next slide, please, where say, if you have a situation where maybe the two tracks are merging at this station, it starts getting very messy. And this is a deliberate diagram to look horrible and messy, because as soon as you start merging these these two different operations merge into each other, it becomes a mess, right? And you start hitting line capacity. The best railway station was the one at the start with just the two, or not the one quite at the start, but the first double track one, where you just have double track, because all the trains will stop and they just conveyor belt through, and you get loads and loads and loads of capacity. So, next slide, please.
So what you're telling me is we've worked out the sort of mathematical ideal railway station, and the quest of railway engineers ever since has been to find ways of making it worse but more interesting.
Can confirm. That's absolutely it.
Yeah, the less complicated the station, the more trains it can handle.
It is. That is it. And the more trains you handle, the less fun it is. You know.
That's the other thing. Yeah, I mean,
So, for example, you have here some absolutely psychotic Swiss railway station approach here. This might be like the approach is like Zurich Central. I don't know. It basically somewhere very European where they are obsessed with creating straight lines out of double slips.
My head hurts.
Which
what
makes
the fuck is this, Gareth?
Yes, Liam.
You might notice there's a diagonal going through the double, in between the double slips here.
Oh my god.
This is a railroad. This is the railway of a people that invents the uncertainty principle.
They're also all standardized double slips. They're all the same switch over and over again.
Oh my god, I'm gonna throw up.
Yeah, I mean, this is a thing that's straight. Like the Europeans love to just run trains at, like fast through all those diagonal like routes, like that. So that straight line that's kind of obvious crossing in front of the train, they run through that at like 40 miles an hour, 50 miles an hour, which is, I mean. Good God, I wouldn't want to do that. We don't do that in the UK because we're pussies. But
well, you don't like hearing 6 noises of it going over those points a second?
Oh my God, just the maintenance for all those and all the gaps. It's just horrible. Anyway, so the point of this image was to say, like, once you start doing complicated things like the previous sort of map with all the kind of crossings, switches smooshing over each other, you start having to do horrible, complicated stuff like this, which is bad for all sorts of reasons. So next slide, please. So all of those were through stations where you have a pair of tracks and they go through and the trains just kind of continue in both directions, in opposing directions. What happens, though, if you want to stop trains at a thing, like, I don't know, because there's a river in the way or because you don't want to bulldoze any more terrain or, I don't know.
You run out of country. It's the coast or whatever.
You're at the edge of the map.
Yeah,
where the
You're at the edge of the
sidewalk
map.
ends.
Yeah, exactly. Well, next slide, please. You can install a terminal platform, so a little terminal station here, and this is actually, this is okay, particularly this layout because the train comes in and it just goes back out again, fairly straightforward.
This is the optimum terminal station from my experience in transport fever.
Yes, yes.
You
Do
only
not do
need
next
one
slide,
track.
please. Yes, do not do next slide.
Oh, why'd you go and do that?
Yeah, don't do that.
Yeah,
Because
now
immediately
you
you've
have
got
a
a
headache.
conflict.
Yeah.
You've got trains coming in and then parking up and then getting in the way of the other trains, possibly wanting to go out. You've also got a load of track that's, you've got switches that are kind of slow to traverse. You've got all sorts of gubbit. It's just not, it's lots of conflicting moves. It's not great. Don't do this. Don't do terminal stations. It's just not, it's not
Especially
great,
if
folks.
your trains can't reverse easily because then you have to do a bunch of spaghetti past the far end of this.
Yeah, you
Of,
got
crossing loops and stuff. Yeah.
Oh, man. So next slide. Oh, yeah. So you have a Y. Ugh.
Maybe you have
next slide,
maybe
please.
you have a turntable, right?
Oh, yeah. Wait, what? Are you drawing a dick and balls? Anyway, so
next slide.
So if you've got multiple services coming in and terminating, again, things get complicated, right? And the challenge is if you've got all sorts of switches crossing over each other, kind of a bit like what we talked about earlier, as you get further from the station, unless you want to keep speeds really low, which is obviously bad for journey times and capacity.
And pussy shit,
if you want to kind of get, if you want trains to be kind of accelerating kind of naturally out the station, then your switches are getting longer, which means that they're taking up more space, which is difficult which kind of holds your geometry. It means that you've got to bulldoze more stuff. They're harder to maintain. They're very expensive to install and look after. So this becomes messy. So yes, this can work, but ideally you'd have these as like separate situations of trains coming in and then going off in their own direction and not kind of crossing over and connecting with each other. Next slide, please. Say you have a different situation, right?
Oh, I hate
Where
to
you
have a
have
different
some-
situation.
I don't like this. I don't like this one. This one makes me unhappy.
Yeah. So you have so the blue ones here are through platforms.
It looks like you're
And
going
the
to
red
get a
one here is terminal
water
platforms.
hammer. Like,
Yes.
Waterhammer 40K.
So in this situation, you've got a real mess. Because you've got trains coming into this terminal platforms and they've got to get in the way of the trains that are potentially doing the normal good fast thing of coming through the platform, stopping and then going without doing anything fancy, which is exactly what you want. So in this situation, the blue railway line, if you like, the blue service is good. That's good. Trouble is the red trains are just getting in the way. They're making a right old mess. And worse, if you're getting as you get further and further from the platforms, ideally you're going to be increasing the speeds through the switches, which means longer switches, which means blah, 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 as we've described before.
And
This is not good.
you can set up some seriously dangerous accidents where you put a train in the way of something that's going very fast.
Yes, do not do that. These things happen. Yes. Ugh. Refer to previous or future episodes.
Yes.
Yeah. So if you go to the next slide, I said this is going to be quick fire. This is what you can do, which is better, which is where you have grades, this fancy thing called grade separation. Now, don't let anyone tell you that the highways people invented these first. In fact, the first motorway junctions were based on railroad junctions.
Yes.
So the railroads did this first, which is where if you've got this nice situation, okay, you've got your nice through tracks, and rather than snarling them up and putting a load of complicated crossovers and stuff on them, what you do is you get your trains up to speed, and they can actually join the tracks kind of going almost at the speed that the through trains would be, and then they can go away and happy days. And likewise, the other direction, you can see there's a train coming in, it leaves the blue line, comes underneath, and comes into the kind of the terminal platforms. And this is better. This is not a bad situation if you have to have terminating and through tracks together.
Fiddling with the sort of like Z-axis here.
Yes, suddenly we've discovered that you can do another dimension.
Wow.
I don't want to do another dimension.
Yeah, this is obviously also complicated. But so I want to give just an example of like what this actually looks like in practicality by looking at King's Cross Railway Station, which fans of well-known turf J.K. Rowling might know. We have here some pictures of a before and after at King's Cross. And this is the 1970s. In fact, behind me, I have the original drawings from this for some bizarre reason. Some nice old guy from the Permanent Way Institution gave me them. I don't know why. Anyway, so here you can see a nice old signal box. On the left and the top left, you can see King's Cross pre-remodeling with nice signal box. Isn't that lovely? And a horrible, complicated mess of tracks. Look at that. Really, tracks that go everywhere. But what you don't want to do is allow lots of flexibility. And indeed, this railway station, they were like, well, we're never going to transport this many people again because the railways are in decline. So what they did was bulldoze all that and simplify it a lot. And admittedly, they did electrify, which is good. And that's where you get the top right-hand picture. So you can see the top right-hand picture. There's less track. You see the less track there. Kind of, yeah.
They got rid of the charming little signal box.
Yeah, they bulldozed that, and they put a load of OLE up, which made all the like greisers who want to take photographs of like steam trains, made all them really angry. Actually, steam trains were gone by this point, but they still wanted to take pictures of their like slightly shonky modernization era diesel that like sprayed oil all over them.
Oh, who doesn't?
Oh, exactly.
I was wondering how exactly they got the Hogwarts Express out of here. Like, is there a secret track that just like appears? Does it come out of a wall? I never understood that.
I always like to think that they just disintegrated it they just demolished it off through the platform and then just built a new one.
They actually cut platform 9 3/4 out, and it's like 9 5/8 now.
So at the bottom you can see the same thing. You can sort of see the differences going on here of like, but also you'll notice that there are more slips on the new layout to try and do more with less space. And actually what they did, they actually closed one of the 3 tunnels. There were 3 tunnels, then they closed them down to 2 tunnels, which was obviously very clever. So if we roll forwards to 5 years ago, this was a dreadful idea. So what we decided to do is basically reverse all of this. Only a few decades later, and you can see that you've got an 11 platform King's Cross, lots of S&C to get the trains kind of onto the 2 tracks, 2 pairs of tracks through Gasworks Tunnel and out. And you can see that the remodeling has kind of extended those out. I was talking about longer switches for a reason. So we've actually got these longer switches so that the stuff happens. The driver can basically go into full notch and accelerate away. You never want to go full notch. Good grief. Anyway, that was it. That was a Minecraft joke, everyone. That was a Minecraft joke. Anyway, So and the reason for putting this diagram up was more so that I could put these pictures up. So next slide, please. And in fact, you can do like a forwards and back because we've got almost in the same position from the helicopter a before and after. So like the next slide again is the new layout. And then you can like roll back to the previous layout again. And you can sort of see all the tracks all smooshed together. And then the next one, they're kind of more opened out. And actually everything can go a bit faster because we've opened up another bore of the tunnel. Anyway, so this is compared to for example, compared to Penn Central, this is a very straightforward, simple setup, right? This is, despite being like one of the main north-facing terminals in London, King's Cross is actually quite a small station. It manages to do quite a lot because it's quite simple, but it is, let's face it, quite a small station. And the majority of capacity is the reason they could do this is because, wait for it, they built some through platforms for Thameslink underneath the station next door.
That's impossible.
So
You
rather
can't do
than
that.
terminating a load of suburban trains, you've got through platforms that have like twice the capacity. So that really helped in simplifying King's Cross, right? This will be relevant, folks. So there's King's Cross. Nice little back and forth. Next slide, please. This is just pornography for the benefit of everyone
Thank
here.
you, Gareth.
There we go. Yes, this is Newcastle East Junction, which for a very long time, I think possibly undefeated champion, held the record for the most diamond crossings of any layout.
Those sexy curves.
There was one in Chicago that came close, but I don't think it was this much.
This is a mess. Like, it's beautiful. Don't get me wrong, but to maintain this, you require a load of dudes, and I've got a picture of them actually building this, and that's in fact the same train. You can see that like mallard looking thing. Is like just right next to them. It's just right next to them going through
like,
at speed.
Well, you're like you have to cast this in like one piece or some crap.
Yeah. So this is like lots of very heavy pieces of metal. Oh golly, so nowadays you just can't build this. I mean, you just. Ugh.
I like how they gave up putting ties in, and it's all on like concrete plinths.
It's worse than that. It's long timbers, so it's like way beams that they've then got to like curve and lay underneath.
Like Brunel track.
It's so great to just like hear an engineer say, technically now this cannot be done anymore.
Yeah. I would not like to, basically all of the things that allow me to sign off on a design as a design lead I just don't have the tools to check that this would be okay anymore.
Is this a single slip on a curve?
It is, yeah. Yeah, it is. Also, some of my favorite stuff is like you can look at the length of some of those little bits of rail where the tracks are like kind of half crossing over each other. I think there's a little bit just near where you've scribbled, just a bit further down. You can see there's like a triangle of metal I can't quite, like the John Maddening needs to be a bit further down. If you follow down from your single slip on a curve, you can see there's like a weird little triangle of metal that is intersected by rails going in all directions. And I would not like to be that little piece of metal because I would get pummeled.
Yeah.
Anyway, so sorry, I just put this in for a
kind of
reason.
Like
this
works on the principle of like faith, I guess.
Yeah. Well, just, the whole thing is like, this is the opposite of the Alice methodology, which is that it's all quite squidgy and you just hope and pray. So the reason I put this in is to show what you can get if you've got tracks intersecting each other. This is really horrible and complicated. You don't want this. Also, just two bonus laugh at the UK slides.
With girder rail. Once you have girder rail, you can do anything you want.
Indestructible.
I learned this from trolleys.
Yeah, but try convincing anyone in North America to use girder rail. Having just spent the last 2 years trying to do that, it's really hard. Yeah. No one likes girder rail in North America. I say North America. I mean the Canadians. The Canadians hate the stuff. Oh, I wouldn't have girder rail. Anyway, so next slide where we can laugh at the UK.
Oh boy.
So relevant to what we've just discussed about Penn Central, here are some, and I really need to emphasize this, brand new renders of the HS2, so the new high-speed line in the UK, high-speed 2's like feather in the cap terminus.
Wait a second.
In Euston.
Wait a second.
Barring it underground.
This is just Penn Station again.
Yeah.
I see what you're doing. This is the same thing 100 years after the fact.
Yeah, we what we have done here is the worst thing. We've done the worst thing, and what's even funnier is if we go to the next slide, which is possibly my favorite of all these, invisible magical oversight development that's invisible.
We're going to put a hotel on top of it.
Oh my God. We don't need to
but no, Alice, as you can see through the hotel to the clouds on the other side, so it doesn't count.
We're going to put a transparent hotel on top of it.
I know, right?
We're going to have a pile of bird corpses at the foot of it.
Yeah, this thing is going to be covered in those like little plastic spikes. Like this is going to have so many of those little anti-pigeon plastic spikes all over it. Oh my God. Anyway, sorry, that was just me interjecting and like hijacking two slides to laugh at bad decisions that we're making that we're not learning from our friends who have to try and use Penn Central.
Yeah, and I think that does dovetail with one of the problems with Penn Station today. Everyone wants to fix Penn Station, right? There's a big obsession with it. People argue online about it all the time.
Constantly.
People try to do it in real life using real money. And there's a lot of it. And they run into a major issue which no one actually wants to address, right? Which is, what's the problem they're fixing?
Yeah.
And this is the hard problem, right? By and large, there's two big theories about what the problem with Penn Station is, which is either A, there isn't enough capacity, or B, there isn't a pretty head house.
Yeah.
And
oh dear.
most of the big funding has gone to B.
Oh no.
Well, the thing is, right, having a pretty head house will increase your capacity because it'll motivate the workers to go faster.
Of course, yeah.
To be fair, put it back the way it was.
We're gonna get to that. So there's been some money spent on operational improvements, right? Since the station was replaced with the current basement, right? So there's direct trains from more locations in New Jersey now through the Aldine connection. There's the West Side Yard, which is this guy over here, where all the Long Island Railroad trains are stored now, making it into a sort of quasi-through station. Right, you got newer.
That's good.
You got newer and more reliable rolling stock. You got the Empire connection, so Amtrak's only using one station in New York City now instead of two, because before they were using both Grand Central and Penn. Now all the trains go into Penn, right? Yeah, I guess to understand what the improvements that have been funded are and what the problems are, we got to actually look at the station and how it operates. Right. So here's our tracks.
This is why I put King's Cross up earlier, just to like compare the difference in scale.
You've moved the difficulty slide up a couple of notches here.
So we have several active platforms. I think this is an Amtrak centric map right here, right? So these platforms are in use.
The fact that it's so complicated that you have like a fucking Mercator projection of your platform map that's like, oh, this one actually really de-emphasizes the size of the fucking.
So we have a lot of platforms here. They serve a lot of different types of trains. You got long distance trains, right? They idle at the platform a while. All of them terminate here. Some of them are international, like the Toronto train and the Montreal train. Most of them have some weird boarding procedures. Essentially, they come in from over here is Sunnyside Yard, right? Sunnyside is where the Amtrak and New Jersey Transit trains are stored. They come in from Sunnyside. They stop at the platform for a while, right? The passengers get on. The catering gets done, right? They leave. They go to like Chicago or Montreal or New Orleans or more Chicago, right? You have intercity trains. Some of them come from Washington, D.C. They stop here. They change crews. They keep going. Either if they terminate here, they go to Sunnyside Yard. If they go through, they go out to Boston, right? Some of them start here. They all come here. They pick up passengers. They go down to Washington, D.C. Some of the trains go up this thing called the Empire Connection here. They go north, right? Then you have the commuter trains.
Oh god.
So, and there's a couple of ways they come through. So some of them come in, they go to the platform, they fart out all their passengers, and then they go back. That's the Long Island Railroad side. Some of them come in, they fart out all their passengers, and then they go into the West Side Yard. Going the other way, New Jersey Transit, some of them come in, they fart out all their passengers, they go back. But again, most of them come in, they fart out all their passengers, and then they go to the Sunnyside Yard, right?
That's fine.
So we have you have this sort of distinction between what you would call a revenue move and a non-revenue move. Hey, it's Justin in post-production, and I don't think I had enough time to explain this adequately. So a move is anytime you move the train. You might be moving it from a station to a station, or from the station to a yard, or 100 other things if you're talking about freight trains, right? A revenue move is one where the railroad is making money, right? Like if passengers or freight are on the train. And a non-revenue move is when the railroad is not making money. That could be a wide variety of things, but in this case means the train is empty. So you want to maximize the time the train is making revenue moves versus non-revenue moves. In our case, just under about half of all moves in Penn Station are non-revenue, right? The train is empty and going to the yard. Now, this is phrased in terms of capitalism, right? We're talking about when the train is making money, but even in a post-scarcity communist utopia, you're going to want to maximize the amount of time the train is doing something productive versus the time it's idle or unproductive, right? It's because you can't conscript everyone into the communist railroad corps, right? The nation needs artists and poets. Anyway, back to the show, right? So
you're sort of empties east,
like
empties
empty
west.
coaching.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. If only there was a drop.
A lot of trains act like they're through trains, but they discharge all of their passengers before they leave. And again, these are very narrow platforms, so it takes a while, right?
Fucking miserable.
Yes. And there also are...
But operationally, those are better, because at least they reduce your conflicting moves.
This is true, yes. And you have two different yards for two different operators. Again, Long Island Railroad's over here. New Jersey Transit is over here. Soon, Metro North's going to be coming in. I don't know how that's going to work. Amtrak is also at Sunnyside over here. You have different power systems. This has third rail and overhead line.
Don't do that. Ugh.
So Long Island Railroad's all third rail. New Jersey Transit's overhead line. Amtrak's overhead line, except the Empire Connection, which is third rail. Yeah. Well, they run these diesel locomotives with the third rail shoe, which they are supposed to turn on when they're in the station area, and a lot of times they don't.
Oh my god!
Getting sprayed with oil. It's back.
Yeah, he's great.
Hooray!
Yeah, you're getting some nice diesel fumes. Yeah, of course, the West Side Yard is also fun because it's probably they use some of the most expensive real estate in the world for storing trains. They built Hudson Yards on top of it now, so it's fine. You know, you had the vessel and stuff like that.
Well, they're
right?
closing the vessel, aren't they?
And they closed them. Yeah, and that and the Neiman Marcus.
I do like the Neiman Marcus.
Neiman Marcus probably has a smaller body count, at least. We can say that for it.
So, but yeah, it's a terminal and through station, right?
Which, as I pointed out earlier in my snazzy rubbish sketches, this is bad, folks.
It's a thruminal station.
Yes. Now, if you wanted some real gore, I could put Chicago Union Station up here.
Jesus.
No.
That's two terminal stations back to back.
Join them up, people.
Yeah,
just join
them up. Yeah, just do it. You already tore down the center concourse to put a skyscraper up. Just join the platforms up. So yeah, the big capacity constraint here are the North River tunnels. There's two tracks. At rush hour, you got 24-ish trains per hour. There's that, and there's a bridge called the Portal Bridge over here, which is notoriously unreliable swing bridge. You have capacity constrained by the tunnels. You have capacity constrained by the platform, so the train's got to sit there a while people sort of file out, right? You got a capacity constraint by the lack of stations. Penn Station is the only one in Manhattan for people commuting from New Jersey and Long Island, although they're starting to change that when the East Side Access Project starts, at least for Long Island. All these trains are very crowded. They're at their maximum length. Most of the New Jersey Transit trains are now bi-level, right? So, you're farting out like 2,000, 3,000 people onto these tiny platforms.
I was going to say, bi-level is bad in this situation.
It's very bad in this situation, yes.
Yeah, don't do that.
And this has been the case for a long time now. And they're looking at right now, since Joe Biden has passed the infrastructure bill, Amtrak wants to shove a lot more intercity service in here, right? Hell
yeah, more Amtrak.
Yeah,
I'm a vulgar Amtrakist. I'm like, more Amtrak trains is always good.
There definitely needs to be a lot more Amtrak trains because all those fucking trains are full all of the time now. Every single, and they're so expensive too. My God.
But like immediately my brain is going, take the commuter trains out of there. Build a new station.
So
build a new separate station. Ideally, build Manhattan Crossrail.
Madison Square Garden 5.
But it was so much of a hassle to build the old one that, like,
What,
I don't know.
Gareth, have you considered that New Jersey and New York don't want to have the same commuter trains?
It needs to be New York Crossrail.
And sort of like Christie Cuomo, like ego fights. Yeah.
Speaking of which, let's talk about the first relatively good plan to fix this. And I'm saying relatively good plan. It's kind of, oh boy.
I'm hearing Chris Christie in my head going, "You have been stopped."
Yeah. This looks like a bit of a Crossrail situation. This is a bit of a segregation of commuter services.
So this was called Access to the Region's Core, or that was the second name. The first one was Trans-Hudson Express, or the Tunnel, right?
Ooh,
yeah,
I like that.
Well, then it became Access to the Region's Core, the ARC Tunnel, right? And this was sort of a relatively good project that got worse and worse, and then it was canceled, right?
Standard.
Yeah. So this is what was called Alternative AA. And so I was not sure of what the operations here were supposed to be like. But the idea was you were going to connect with brand new tunnels and a brand new station cavern, Penn Station, Grand Central Terminal. And, you'd have trains that they'd come in from the Northeast Corridor, the commuter trains. They'd go stop at the new platforms, and then they would go up to Grand Central. And then it's a little unclear to me as to what would happen then.
You just link everything with a big basement. Essentially.
Yeah, essentially. I still am I think New Jersey's transit trains would then go out to Sunnyside this way, right? And apparently the Long Island Railroad would do the same thing, but backwards. They'd stop in other stations here.
Yeah.
And then they would go down to their own yard down here, right? So we're still not doing through running, but we're pretending a lot better.
It's not quite through running.
Yeah.
I mean, just do through running, folks.
I mean, if you could just unify the rolling stock and the power systems,
if we could only do Conrail 2 at the point of a gun.
The one thing that's always been missing from these things is just basic coordination between the different transit agencies. The other thing is something more efficient than Penn Station, right? So this was estimated to cost $8.7 billion back in like 2000 and 2003, 2005-ish, right? This was reduced.
It's about double that in today's money.
Yeah, so that was reduced in scope.
That's not that much money, though.
Well, it was reduced in scope to, rather than doing all those extra tunnels, you would have a separate tunnel for New Jersey Transit that would terminate in a cavern under Penn Station, and that was it.
Oh.
Right?
Well, that's got to be less expensive, though, right?
It's less expensive, obviously. It's less tunnel boring.
Yeah.
You do have the issue that you can't get the trains to the yard now. But
well,
whatever.
Small oversight.
Yeah, I know. It's a little oversight. So now that they reduced the scope, the new cost estimate was $15 billion.
Love it.
Yeah.
Classic.
So,
do less with more.
Yeah. So they started construction in 2010.
Oh, wow.
Right? They started excavating like the tunnel boring machine pit, right? And a guy named Chris Christie became governor of New Jersey.
Fucking asshole.
Oh.
He initially supported the project, and then he saw the cost overruns, right? And New Jersey was directly on the hook for about $1.8 billion of this, right?
Yeah, and that money needs to go to like building an enormous like Springsteen museum.
Yes.
It's a good skate. Leave it alone.
we need to like slightly increase the size of the font on the Trenton Makes the World
Stop
Takes.
it. It's a good bridge.
We need to redo the whole bridge with slightly larger letters.
Actually, when they renovated the bridge, they did redo it in slightly larger letters.
Did.
Oh my god! See, I have come to a deep psychic understanding of the state of New Jersey purely by accident, by imagining what a bunch of like blowhard northeastern Italians would do, and this has worked out for me perfectly.
Yeah, you nailed it.
So a lot of this was being funded through the American Reinvestment and Recovery Act. Obama, right?
Obama,
and Barack Obama, as the BBC said. But New Jersey was directly on the hook for about $1.8 billion through the New Jersey Turnpike Authority for some reason. And so
What?
Christie decided, all right, I'm canceling my share of the project, which effectively meant
yeah, cool.
canceling the whole project. And then they spent that money on road improvements in Hudson County.
Big Springsteen
good
museum. Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
So 2 years later,
the entire state of New Jersey went into New York City and spent that money on a T-shirt at San Gennaro.
Jesus.
so having canceled,
Yeah, let me get an extra large. Yeah, it'll be $1.8 billion.
having canceled this project, 2 years later, Hurricane Sandy hit, right, and flooded the existing North River tunnels, right.
Yep.
And then there's been this sort of slow rolling salt corrosion in the concrete ever since, which requires really heavy repairs, which Amtrak says they got to take one of the tubes out of service in order to do it properly, right? So now there was an absolute need for 2 more tunnels.
So good job we're building them.
Yeah. Well, no, we're not building them. Yeah. So
it's America, Gareth. We're dumb as fuck here.
It's not just. Don't worry. We can all be friends together.
Yeah. Well, yeah. The other fun one is that there was a little bit of advanced warning about Hurricane Sandy on account of it was a hurricane, which takes a while to get up there.
Don't they land like quite a few states south? Normally?
Yeah, it came up from I don't remember where Sandy started, but it took
Georgia, I think,
like Georgia or some crap. Yeah, I mean, you had like 2 or 3 days warning. Anyway, so they had like a huge amount of their rolling stock stored in a yard in like Long Branch, right, which is protected by one sand dune from the ocean.
No!
Yeah, so all their electric locomotives got flooded out and a huge amount of the rolling stock. They just didn't move it. It's like you could have
just a guy down there scraping salt off all the electrics.
Yeah.
Standing at the head of an electric locomotive with a harpoon in hand, like grimly reciting Rhyme of the Ancient Mariner.
No. Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
So, all right. So Chris Christie, of course, canceled the funding for these tunnels that were already under construction. So we have to. But luckily, Andrew Cuomo still wanted a project.
Oh no!
I still want a project. That was the dreadful Cuomo.
Oh my God! So Daniel Patrick Moynihan was a U.S. senator from New York. He was most famous for the Moynihan Report, where he did phrenology to determine the cause of black poverty back in 1965, right?
1965. Oh, it's a good year for getting the calipers out.
Exactly, right? He blamed poverty on sort of ghetto culture and the existence of the welfare state. Also one of the architects of LBJ's War on Poverty, which maybe is why it didn't work that well.
Oh, dear.
Love a Great Society guy.
Oh, my God.
They're always so cool.
Yeah. But he also thought a major issue with Penn Station was the lack of a pretty head house, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because he remembered back when he was a boy in shining shoes in the Penn Station concourse, right?
Fuck my ass, dude.
So the solution...
Even when America does meritocracy, it still finds a way to fuck everything up.
So the solution was... what if we glass in the courtyard of the James Farley Post Office across the street from Old Penn Station, right? Because it covers the end of some of the platforms, right? Platforms which are used for Long Island Railroad and Amtrak, right? But not New Jersey Transit, which has the worst capacity constraints. Fuck those guys, right?
Oh, yeah. Screw them.
And this project languished for a long time until champion of the people, Andrew Cuomo, rode in. Right, I think he got
being given an opportunity to fuck with the people of New Jersey and also like be photographed opening something.
Yes. So, now what does this concourse do? Right, and I think maybe
makes it more annoying to wait for a train.
Gives you somewhere to shop in New York City, which previously didn't have a lot of stores.
No, there's no stores in this concourse yet.
Nope, there's not.
They haven't opened that part yet.
Oh, wait, what?
Yeah. They're still working on the stores part. You go in here and there's nothing.
You can't even get your like shoes shined by a future senator.
No, you can do that at 30th Street Station, though. So what you have some escalators, right? That go down to various platforms, and those platforms
are very thin.
If you're in the box here, you can get down to the Amtrak platforms, right? And then these extra platforms, fuck you.
They've got some gamer lights on there on the top, though, on the roof thing. You got some RGB on there.
Oh yeah, they got some RGB, yeah.
And so the general idea here, right? You get a nice glass roof space to wait for Amtrak. It's very similar to the philosophy of old Penn Station in that this is only for long distance trains, really, and intercity trains.
So what they did was they learned none of the good lessons, and they decided to implement everything that didn't work about the original Concourse? ?
There's another problem, which is this. All these escalators are at the end of the platform.
Okay.
So that when you board the train, rather than boarding at the middle and walking a short distance to your seat,
standard practice,
normal. Board at the end and walk a much farther distance to your seat.
Fucking stupid.
That's not good for passenger flow. I take it no one did any passenger flow modeling as part of this design.
I feel like, the main result of this is probably reduced theoretical capacity. But again, because they do all the crew changes here, all those trains are sitting there for 10 minutes regardless. It kind of doesn't matter. But if you were getting serious about like really frequent service on the Northeast Corridor, what do you do with this concourse other than get rid of it?
It's actually worse than Penn Station, right? Because at least Penn Station, you could like, if you bought a ticket, you could go into your gender segregated waiting room and wait there and sit down, right? Like. This doesn't have unisex waiting rooms. It doesn't have gender segregated waiting rooms. It doesn't have any waiting rooms.
So I think I'm not sure if there's regular ticketed seating. There's ticketed seating in the old new Penn Station concourse. This is the new location of this. Yeah, exactly. This is the location of the new Club Acela, right? Which you can get into if you have either Acela tickets or long distance tickets. Club Acela sucks. It's not worth it. They don't even have booze.
Noted.
They don't. It's like if I'm going into like the club, I want booze. They don't have booze. They have free snacks and coffee.
Coffee. Great.
Yeah, and they bring you down to the platform in an elevator, which I guess is nice. Although I bet in this one they don't.
Yeah,
because I don't know where the elevators would be. I dislike Club Acela. Ticketed seating also sucks.
It's just trying to like rip airport shit where it's like, we'll give you like a VIP lounge. But
give me a bar in the train station I can sit at and relax and wait. That's what I want.
Bring back Bridgewaters, you bastards.
Yeah, you need a Weatherspoons. That's what I used to do in Aberystwyth Station when I was catching the train away. There was a Weatherspoons in the station. You could sit in the Weatherspoon. This is when Weatherspoons was still cool.
Yeah, Gareth is so right.
Explosion face guy.
This is one of the few aspects of British culture that I will defend here. Is you can absolutely get drunk in a Weatherspoons waiting for your train, and that's listen, Europe and a lot of other places do it better than us, but we do it better than you in this one.
Yeah, I mean, this has been. I feel like this is it's a lot of people focus a lot on like, well, there's no seating in here, but there's also like 10 million other problems going on, which are based on like basic train station function. And the other thing is, Cuomo wanted this to be his signature project, right? He was very, very demanding while project was underway. Right. And this is also, it's half about the train station. It's half about a land grab to support the rest of the Hudson Yards development. They wanted to lease the whole building to Facebook. They were doing a whole bunch of crap.
Yeah.
God forbid
build
you use
a massive work of public art that makes you want to kill yourself.
Well, God forbid you use a post office, which is right above, a rail corridor. Maybe, you could run mail by rail. no, we're gonna get rid of the post office. We're gonna put Facebook in there. And that's fucking great.
Well,
yeah.
the thing is, right? If like New York City, no one's mailing anything to or from it, and if they are, they can use an Amazon distribution center.
Yeah, I mean, certainly
Stop
not
it.
to other cities which also have former post office directly next to the train station, like Philadelphia or Washington D.C. or Baltimore.
we gotta build the like Amazon and like UPS fulfillment centers out of town.
But one at Cuomo was Cuomoing all over the people who were running this project, most notably Michael
He was
Evans.
what now?
He was Cuomoing over
He's
them.
Cuomoing all over them. I mean, he was being a huge fucking asshole. He wanted to get this thing, he wanted to get it delivered in 2020. And his solution to that was just scream at his underlings, right? And it was apparently bad enough that the project lead, Michael Evans, fucking killed himself in late 2020.
Jesus.
Yeah.
Good grief.
And yeah, it was, and it's a shame because, you know, I guess he believed in the project and kind of it's a bad project.
Yeah, but still, it doesn't exactly like warrant being hounded to an early grave.
Yeah,
It's like
exactly.
one of the worst people in American politics, which is fucking saying something. Andrew Cuomo.
It's disgusting, man. It's like I can't. I don't know. Now they did get it open in 2020, December 30th, 2020.
What is a buzzer, baby?
Oh my god!
Nice, yeah.
Yeah, and it's still only half open. I don't believe they've opened the retail section yet. You know, but
you know that's a failure under capitalism is you can't even spend money if you want to.
Yeah,
like, it's supposed to be the one thing you can do anywhere, and you can't even fucking consume.
But I gotta say, in terms of like at least how I use Penn Station, right? Because when I go to Penn Station, I have a single-minded determination, which is I'm going to buy 2 gigantic cans of beer, which I'm going to take on the train and drink on the way to Philadelphia, right? That is possible in the old concourse. It is not possible in the new concourse. And I believe
what reason do you have to be in there?
Yeah, exactly.
As a result.
Consequently. And I believe Amtrak's intention is to eventually force all the Amtrak passengers into here.
But it's bad.
But it's bad, and I don't trust that there's going to be
a flag with a star and 2 big cans of IPA, and it just says "Come and take it."
Yep.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes, that, but unironically.
And I don't trust that they're going to put a shitty newsstand in here with giant cans of beer, of which in the old concourse there's like 50 of.
Yeah, thank God.
So yeah, I'm going to avoid using this concourse until I'm absolutely forced to. But there has been a recognition that 2 more tunnels are needed. So let's talk about Gateway and Penn South.
Oh boy.
All right.
What the fuck is this?
Yeah, it's Pixels.
Yeah, it's Pixels, and I stole it from trains.com, which...
Is that a watermark?
Yeah, it's a photo bucket watermark. All right, so they want to put 2 new tunnels in under the North River, and they have the funding for it finally. This is now going into construction, right? So the basic conceit here is we have 2 new tunnels for Amtrak and New Jersey Transit, but mostly New Jersey Transit, which will terminate into Penn South.
Hooray!
Which is going to be underneath existing buildings, which are all going to get demolished to put it in this cut and cover station, including the last part of the original Penn Station complex standing, the powerhouse.
Oh, no. Oh, dear.
And, you know, they go into these stub-ended platforms and then question mark. Because,
and as we know, mixing through and terminal platforms is
a great idea. Well, the first thing you might notice is that these platforms don't connect to New Jersey Transit's yard. Yeah.
I also don't see any grade separation to ensure that the operations don't impact on the capacity of the through station.
Yep. Yeah.
Oh.
Worry about that. Fix it in post.
The tunnels like start somewhere over here. So, I mean, it doesn't really go into... I'm a little bit confused as to the actual track layout because I think this is still in flux. They may be getting rid of Penn South, but I'm not sure. Right. But the current situation is basically centered around we're going to minimize disruption of existing services while also minimizing the amount of new service we can provide at the maximum cost.
Yeah. It's the British sort of way as well. That's what we've been doing with our changes to railway plans. It's good stuff. It's a disease of the mind.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, you're going to make it more expensive and worse. That's the fundamental thing. Make it more expensive and worse.
Gotta be. Yeah.
The idea is if they build Penn South, then there'll be enough capacity they can start doing open heart surgery on the actual station, right? Because I mean, one of the problems, especially with A interlocking back here, it's called A interlocking, is that they put a bunch of buildings on top of it, so it's very difficult to reconfigure the tracks at all. Reconfiguring platforms, again, that's very difficult because one of the perennial things is let's just widen the platforms and have through trains, and it's very difficult. It's doable, but because the station is running at the absolute bleeding edge of capacity, actually going in and doing it would be very difficult.
Yeah.
So anyway, this project.
How will Penn South relieve Penn Station, given that they're all terminal and Penn Station is primarily through?
I would answer that with question mark. My guess is
it's a totally different use case.
My guess is 8 New Jersey Transit trains come in.
And then
once. That's 8 fewer.
And then they're buried there. They're entombed there.
And they just die.
That's
what they never go to New York.
It's like platform 9 3/4. They are vaporized
and reassembled outside of the train station. Yes.
Yeah. You come into these stub-ended platforms. The train is reduced to a soup-like homogenate, and then the next train comes in.
So this was Andrew Cuomo project, which again they may get rid of the Penn South aspect and just build the new tunnels. This is still in flux. It's budgeted at $14.5 billion, which is slightly less than ARC
than the slightly shrunk version of the original plan.
And if you can get a job doing like union labor building those tunnels, you can make a lot of money.
But they're going to use this theoretical extra capacity to start really renovating the main concourse, right? So here's some renders that came out of the Cuomo administration.
Oh my!
This Fallout 2 FMV.
I really like how it's fairly clear that they didn't use an extended font. They just took a regular font and squashed it.
Just fucking designed by Biff Tannen here.
It's funny because there's not actually any real passenger improvements here that are visible. It's just they put a sign in front of Madison Square Garden
using word art.
Yeah.
Contract the Knicks. That is our answer. We must rid ourselves of the New York Knicks.
The other big improvement is they're putting much taller buildings around it. So this is.
I was going to say, are all of the buildings we can see new?
These would all be. This would be new. This is where the powerhouse would be, or maybe this one. This is where the Hotel Pennsylvania was, which is being demolished right now. That's the other original part of the Penn Station complex. That's also Statler of Statler and Waldorf.
And then even if they do all of this, this is before the NYPD gets their hands on it and decide to put in a bunch of like big concrete counterterrorism planters to stop someone from driving a truck into that big glass frontage.
Yeah. It's already covered with those. Oh my God.
Great. Perfect.
And then there's going to be like some kind of concourse that's behind the arena, right? It all looks, it looks very modern. It still looks like a horrifically constrained site, which is completely inadequate. That's the theme of this. As long as this arena is here, there's very little you can do.
Basically, right? what we need is Cassatt's big giant hand again.
Yeah.
Now, what if we leave it to the private sector?
Let's not do that.
Maximum efficiency.
Let's not do that.
So this is a company called Ameristar Rail. Their idea is they want to privatize the Northeast Corridor. So here's their idea.
Suck my dick and die.
Here's their idea to increase platform capacity.
Oh, I do not like
No,
that.
it's bad.
I'm seeing this cross section and I'm just realizing what that is and what it says. It says platform flat cars.
Yes. Yes.
That's a great way to for a bunch of people to lose a foot. I'm also very interested in the people in the exit only lane who are all doing the soy walk.
What you do, their proposal is we maintain a couple tracks for rapid intercity service. This has nothing to do with commuter service, too, which is the fun part. You have tracks for rapid intercity service with very frequent trains. We implement what's called Spanish solution boarding, right? So you exit on one side of the train and you enter on the other side. Now,
yeah, I've done it. It sort of can work on commuter trains.
Now, in order to do that, they need to extend the platforms, right? And extending the platforms in Penn would solve a lot of problems, right? Just in terms of moving trains through more quickly because people could board and exit faster without clogging up the stairwells. So their idea to do this is to roll in some flat cars, put some deck planking on top.
What?
And that's the platform extension.
Kind of into it, actually. That's so roughshod and terrible.
Imagine rolling a wheelchair across this.
Well,
yeah.
So it'd be like sort of a semi-permanent surface, I understand. Amtrak has a few of these platform flat cars actually for temporary track work. This would be permanent until you could get a more permanent solution in. Also, you do have issues with the columns here, which might block doors, which would be bad.
Oh my!
But yeah, so this was their idea, and I don't know. I don't hate it as a stopgap solution, but also you should be figuring some more permanent solution, and also this is again missing the point.
My answer to this diagram is simply: do you not feel shame? Do you not feel shame that this is your incremental solution?
I if it works, it works. Man. It might not work.
Well, yeah, the trouble is, right, okay, so British railway brain, which I have, is every temporary solution should be assumed as being the long-term solution.
Yeah.
And let me tell you, this would be a horrible long-term solution.
Yeah, they would never get rid of it, bud.
Well, that'd be pretty...
that's as soon as those are there, they ain't going anywhere.
This is true.
It's disabled people.
Yeah.
So, yeah,
not true.
The other problem is you're also...
The entire British rail sector is a temporary solution to how to move tin out of fucking tin quarries.
Not entirely
it's
wrong.
It's just outgrown from there, yeah.
It's true. I can confirm.
But the other thing here is you're doing this solution to the intercity trains, which are not the capacity problem as of yet. Maybe if they ran more of them. Right.
All the big bi-level New Jersey Transit trains, they're not getting the little platform flat cars.
Oh no.
They continue as normal.
I mean, you kind of have the reverse situation where the intercity train should be bi-level and the commuter train should be single level. That would be the sane and sensible solution. We do the backwards of that. Because again, the dwell time's not as important for intercity trains or long distance trains.
No, and it means you can run because you can then run fewer of them, which gives you more space for the commuter. Oh man, it's not that complicated.
It's all backwards. So this is one solution, and then you have let's talk about the solution everyone's always talking about. Well, what if you just rebuilt the original head house?
Oh no!
yes, I will not be dissuaded.
Return. What if we returned?
Put it back the way it was, brick by goddamn brick.
So these were some renders that were created for the National Civic Art Society by something that I used to think was an architecture firm, but now realize was actually a graphic design firm.
Ew.
Oh dear.
Worse.
Right. The National Civic Art Society, you might remember the people who were really chuffed when Trump did that classicism executive order.
Weird Trump freaks.
Yeah, which that executive order wouldn't have done anything, but also be this weird as hell, right?
They're so trad that they even want to call it Pennsylvania Station. You have to say the whole thing, like a Tribe Called Quest.
You do.
Yes.
5 to 5 Assassin, baby.
And this is one of those situations where you look at the problem like we don't have the nice head house as opposed to the station has a major capacity constraint, which we don't have. We can't do very much about without major surgery on the station, right? They do. You can see here. They do suggest wider platforms, which would help. You got escalators. You got probably a generally better passenger experience. But the other thing here is that if you rebuilt the original station, even with those improvements, you'd still be well below the passenger capacity needed. I mean, if you could do it, but I think you would have to take out the other half of the station and rebuild the second concourse. Like it would not, or build an identical concourse to the first one. It would not be something that was historically accurate. It'd be a pastiche. And I mean, the original was a pastiche. Let's get real. I mean, it's all steel with plaster over it. Right. And I mean, I don't hate this idea. Right. But if it's not executed well, it's going to be an embarrassment.
I'll say it. I hate it. Just work out what you need this railway station to do. Yeah. And then work. Why is it all like? Oh, let's look at. It's just so backwards. It's so backwards. Why do we do this in the Anglosphere? Why do we do this?
Because we're very dumb. You know that.
This is true. Yep. I don't think these guys have any momentum anymore because, of course, we got to keep Madison Square Garden there. That's the priority one.
Contract the Knicks. Yeah. And the Rangers. I fucking hate the Rags too.
And so you have some alternative proposals. This is from the Regional Plan Association, right? Which is really where you have to look at the problem a little bit more holistically, right? See, because you ask, is the problem Penn Station, or is the problem how do we get more rail capacity into Manhattan? And then you have a lot more options, right? Because maybe the place you start is at not Penn Station. And then when you move more people in through an alternate way in, like something, I don't know, maybe
fucking go back to ferries even. I don't give a shit. Do flying taxis.
You could
just do a proper S-Bahn.
If you do an S-Bahn. You just do an S-Bahn. You really start to reconfigure some of these commuter services so they work with each other. You build a new station in, say, lower Manhattan, even, I don't know, upper Manhattan, right? Connects to different subway lines and can really shove through a lot of trains really quickly and is built for that task. And then once you've moved a significant amount of that capacity out of Penn Station into something which can handle, the actual passenger load needed, then you can start saying, how do we improve this station, the Penn Station?
I really like the line you have about not doing open heart surgery.
Yeah. Well, that was actually from someone on our Discord who I think would prefer not to be named. So, yeah, I guess that's the, that's the problem with Penn Station is that you're focusing on Penn Station.
Yeah, don't do that. Yeah. Do something else.
Retroactively, do not listen to this podcast.
No. Yes. Don't listen to this
Purge
podcast.
it from your brain.
Yeah.
It's a stupid question. We've all spent too long trying to answer.
Yeah.
Now, what we could do instead is we could reconfigure your transit system from Stuttgart and still achieve the same effect.
We are going to Stuttgart. We are going to make Stuttgart's railway very good.
I don't believe they're going to do any of this things.
This is something that a lot of the German, I want to say the Green Party really hates Stuttgart 21.
But you should not listen to Green parties on railway infrastructure. We've learned this.
Every time I looked at this project, I was like, that's a pretty good project. We should be doing that.
Yeah, pretty much. And they've done what you've just described in the crayon slide before, which is they've kind of taken a bigger look at what actually needs to happen to achieve this. So they're building a new station. They're essentially building a new station under the kind of underneath the existing one, perpendicular to it, and it's a through station rather than a terminal station, and it's in fact got half the number of platforms, and it has 50% more capacity.
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing what you can do when you actually design for high capacity, as opposed to trying to, sort of tweak around the edges. And I don't know, demolished 2 blocks of buildings for stub-ended platforms that don't really work very well.
I mean, it's worth saying, like, you could have a 4-track heavy, kind of high density kind of through route going through Manhattan, right? Going through Lower Manhattan.
Yeah.
You could build a platform with. You could have 2 4-track. Yeah, you could have a 4-track platform.
Yeah.
That would have, honestly, absolutely immense capacity. You could get 120,000 passengers per hour per direction through that sort of, only 4 tracks. It's all you need. It's just that you conveyor belt it. You have long trains, 12-car trains or whatever, even longer if you like, and just absolutely design for that. And go for like a deep bore, so you don't need to demolish stuff up top other than maybe shafts. Like, you could do this. It's not beyond the wit of humankind to achieve.
You got really good bedrock. You got like
we choose to build a second train station and do the other things, not because they are easy, but because they are hard.
Yeah,
Yes.
I always thought, the way you would, if I were mayor/god of New York City, I would, you'd link Hoboken Terminal with Atlantic Terminal. You have a station in like Washington Square. You'd have a second Manhattan station. You'd have another station under, Brooklyn, and you would try and unify whatever the highest ridership New Jersey Transit line was with the highest ridership Long Island Railroad line with, very high frequency trains that would use these tracks.
Right.
You know what I'd do if I were mayor/god of New York City?
Sure.
I would rig the ice market.
Yes, and I would contract the Knicks, and I would contract the Nets. I would get rid of the Isles, and the Isles actually play out on Long Island again. And I would get rid of the Rangers, and I would get rid of the New York Giants, who don't even
When
play
you
in New
say
York.
get rid of, do we mean sort of like North Korean failed international football team, kind of like get rid of?
I
dear.
know they would be released to other teams. However, their owners would be in front of Madison Square Garden, and I would to make Penn Station cool. And there would be a giant statue to me. I am bordering on the delirious.
It's been
I cannot.
so
Let's
long.
face it. It's been so long. This is a long one. Let's face it. I could try and be mayor and or god of New York, but all I'd end up doing is doing the Scottish/British guy thing of just meandering around, looking at everything, going, "Holy shit, this place is quite a city, isn't it?" And just being lost, and then like American like locals would laugh at me a lot and would possibly get me to say things. That's pretty much that would be my.
I think what you
Gareth,
need to do
were
is
you
to
a
become
single
the, like,
man, you would be a hit in bars. I'll tell you that.
become like the Lord Mayor of New York City.
Lord
Where
Mayor.
you just get like a big chain and
Big
you get
sash.
to engage in all the like
can I have a
various
bell?
and engage in all the like various local folkways and customs and traditions.
Wouldn't that make you like
and not have
mayor
to
of
think
like
about
that would make it like mayor of like
trains.
a tiny square mile of like the financial
Yeah,
district,
you
though, right?
take over what Shirley Church
yeah.
owns.
Oh yeah.
Also, I don't like the end of Alice's description there. Alice, didn't like the last bit. I can't not think about trains. It's not a thing. I'm not wired that way. They made me this way.
So anyway,
Well, what did we fucking learn from this? Other than that we
Trains.
spent 3 hours answering the wrong
duct
question.
tape your mic cable into
Yeah,
the.
thanks for nothing, Ross.
yeah, I
Mhm.
mean, that's the issue is we spend all this time thinking about Penn Station, and the what we learn is stop thinking about Penn Station.
Yes.
It's a sort of a Zen koan, right? Like the answer to the question is not to contemplate the question in the first place.
Yes,
We've achieved Buddha nature
I was about
in
to say.
Penn Station on the
Station,
Daniel
yeah.
Patrick Moynihan Concourse.
Good
We
for
have
us.
achieved Buddha nature.
I'm there meditating on the
Yeah.
floor because there's nowhere else to meditate.
Drinking
That's
your
right.
beers. Complaining bitterly about it. He is right, though.
Yeah, when you post this on YouTube, it'll just immediately disappear.
Absolutely. Total non-attachment to all things, including getting your train on time.
You so a Buddhist monk walks up to a falafel stand, and the guy says, "Oh, what can I get you, boss?" And
He
the
says,
Buddhist
"Make
says,
me one with everything."
Yes.
Yes.
Now, in order to annoy Alice as much as possible. This will continue for another 4.5 acts.
All right, now time to talk about St. Louis Union Terminal.
Bye, everyone.
Spare me.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.
All right.
Are we really ending it? Fuck, I was
think so.
ready to go.
I'm so
Liam, I was going to say you perked it up.
Yeah.
You just
No, this is the delirium setting in.